Fourth Wing, the book that I unfortunately have to give all the credit for getting me out of a 7-year reading slump earlier this year. I'm never gonna be able to live that down. If you know of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, then you know that it's beloved on TikTok for the dragons and spicy scenes. Also, the insanely toxic relationship in here. Okay, but look, Fourth Wing is my biggest hear me out book. Hence, why I had to make an entire video explaining the entire plot in 2 hours and 20 minutes. Real fast, before I send you over to recap Natalie, if you like videos of a girl in her 20s recapping entire books for you and slowly going insane the entire time, go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button. It really does help a girl out a lot, and I really do appreciate it. With the mandated YouTube talk out of the way, enjoy me losing my sanity, even though I do like this book, but I still lose my sanity every time I make one of these videos. It's all for you. Let's just start with the note on the first page of this book. The following text has been faithfully transcribed from Narvirian into the modern language by Jensenia Neilwart, curator of the Scribe Quadrant as Basgayev War College. All events are true, and names have been preserved to honor the courage of those fallen. Fallen! May their souls be commanded to Malik. This is the first book of a 5-book series. We'll worry about the fallen part later. But what I need us to focus on right now is that this book, supposedly, is written by this girl right here. Now keep in mind, this whole book is written in Violet's point of view the whole time. And some of the scenes in here are absolutely insane to think about in the context of you reading them in a history book. Because that is what it is telling me, that Fourth Wing is a history book. I don't know about you, but all I know about Mr. Hamilton and Mariah Reynolds is they had an affair. I don't know the details of that affair, and I don't wanna. But apparently, the Navarians like their history spicy. With all that being said, let's just get into the actual recap of this book and maybe ignore that this is supposed to be in a historical documentation for a fictional world. This is our main character, Violet. She is a 20-year-old girl who is trained to be a scribe her entire life and is also chronically ill. Except now that her dad died, her mom Lilith, the general of the War College, has decided she needs to be a dragon rider. Lilith wants to put her chronically ill daughter in the toughest unit of the War College. This is like if my mom one day said, Natalie, I know you wanted to be a writer your whole life, but now you're gonna be a Navy SEAL. I'm also very chronically ill. And that would not work at all. The Navy SEALs would not let me even get near them. Anyways, it's Conscription Day, which is where all the 20-somethings decide on what area of the War College they're going into. We have the Writers' Quadrant, we have the Scribes, we also have Healers, and then we have normal infantry. Those are your choices. Choose wisely. Violet is struggling her way to her mom's office because she packed a pack that is just filled with books. Normally not a big deal, but to get into the Dragon Riders area, you have to cross a beam hundreds of feet in the air, and you have to carry all your stuff over by yourself, and if you fall off, you're dead. She's struggling to walk up the stairs right now, but I'm sure it'll be no problem on a beam hundreds of feet in the air. When she is almost to her mom's office, she hears somebody arguing with her mother, which doesn't happen because her mom, again, is the general of this war college and has a lot of respect. But of course, it's just her older sister Mira, who she hasn't seen in a few years, arguing with her mom about putting her chronically ill sister in the Writers' Quadrant when she is not trained for this, except for the past 6 months. Mira is trying to get it into her mother's head that Violet's body just breaks easier than everybody else's. Her body is not made to be a writer. She has trained her whole life to be a scribe, and she is going to be a great scribe. Just let her do that. In a shocking turn of events, her mom does not agree to this. Our girl is still going to the Writers' Quadrant, whether Mira likes it or not. Violet walks in and the arguing stops. She has a not so heartfelt goodbye with her mother, and then Mira takes her to repack her entire pack, braid her hair, and get her actually ready for the Writers' Quadrant. Because our girl is not ready right now. Mira has also brought a change of clothes for her sister, including a dragon scale vest, so it's a lot harder for people to kill her. Because in Dragon Rider training, you can just murder people. That's totally chill. Again, imagine if the Navy SEALs were just allowed to murder their other Navy SEALs. I don't know if that would be really good for morale. But this world's excuse is that they don't want any weaklings riding dragons, so if you're weak, you gotta die. Her mother obviously knows this is the way of things, and still decides to sign up her chronically ill daughter, whose bones break easier than everybody else's, up to go to the Riders Quadrant. If I was Violet right about now, I would be questioning if my mother even liked me. And I would be coming to the answer that no, she never did. Anyways, Violet is changing into her dragon scale vest, her shoes that have actual grip on them so she doesn't fall off the parapet. She's putting all the daggers on her that Mira brought for her as well. Mira is preparing our girl for war because Mira has been through this college and knows what it's like and knows it is cutthroat. Violet is not so happy to come back to see her bag is completely barren of books now. How dare her sister take out all of her books so she could actually make it across the parapet and not die instantly. Crazy. On their way to the parapet, Mira is giving Violet some basic advice. Don't make any friends while you're there. Find Dane Atos, her childhood best friend, and stay away from Xaden Ryerson, the son of the rebellion leader that her mother ordered be put to death, and also his dad killed her brother, so a little bit of tension there. I'm sure they'll stay away from each other. Surely. Mira says goodbye at the tower leading up to the parapet and says, "Don't make me an only child," and leaves. And now we're just with our girl, Violet. On the apparently at least 15-minute climb to the top, that is enough to convince me I am not made to be a dragon rider, right there. As much as I want a dragon best friend, 15 minutes of climbing stairs? No thank you. But on this climb, Violet meets Rhiannon and Dylan. Dylan is the most hyped out of any of them. He is so ready to be a dragon rider. He has trained for this his entire life. He wants to be engaged to his girlfriend right now, but she said that would be bad luck, so he's just wearing her engagement ring around his neck, going over the parapet. Rhiannon is also nervous, but excited. She's trained for this her whole life as well. She's pretty confident. They all become quick friends. Advice number 1 from Mira is already being ignored. We've been separated from Mira for all of 15 minutes, and Violet, in true little sister fashion, just decides, why would I listen to her? It is now starting to pour rain as they're supposed to cross this open beam suspended in the sky from 2 towers hundreds of feet apart. So Violet asks Rhiannon, what is your shoe size? Because she notices that her shoes have no grip. Luckily, they're pretty similar in sizes, so she switches one of her shoes with her so her new best friend doesn't die. They're now to the point where they're giving their names to cross the parapet, and guess who is right there? That's right, Xaden. The guy she's supposed to stay away from. And what is Violet's first thought of Xaden? The man she's supposed to stay away from? He is the most exquisite man I have ever seen. She also wants to climb him like a tree, so, you know, she's not holding back how she thinks about this man right now. Violet, honey, I get it, you're 20, but you've been told he wants to kill you. It's not that he just doesn't like her, it's that he wants to kill her. But no, sure, fantasize about climbing him like a tree. Great job, girl. Great survival instincts. I'm so proud of you. This is such a CW show. Oh, I do love this book, I promise. These two then say each other's names to build the tension and talk about the wrongdoings of each other's families to the other's families. Dylan is already walking across the parapet, leaving poor Rhiannon here to deal with this all alone. Violet then just asks Xaden, "Are you going to kill me?" Bold. We then hear a scream. It's not from Violet. It's from our guy Dylan, you know, who we thought was going to be part of this main trio here. Part of the main friend group. Yeah, no, he's dead. Being real honest, this is my second read through of the book and I still had to go back and look up his name so I could print out a picture and put his name up there for all of 5 minutes of this video. Anyways, that's one out of many deaths in this series, I'm sure. If I keep doing recaps of all 5 books in this series that are to come, I'm sure most of this board will be over here, unfortunately. Rebecca scares me. After Dylan's gone kasplat, Xaden responds saying, "Why would I waste my energy when the parapet will do it for me?" Do you still want to climb him like a tree, Violet? Do you? Probably. Rhiannon starts crossing a little bit before Violet, and then Violet starts crossing. It is pouring rain. Wind is coming from every direction. She is barely staying on. She's fallen down to the beam a time or two while she's crossing this. And to stay calm while she's almost fallen off the parapet a few times already, she starts reciting things she's memorized from textbooks. If I was up there in this situation, I think, honestly, I would resort back to teenage Natalie and start reciting like 5 seconds of Summer lyrics. She then hears a scream from behind her, and it is a kid getting tossed off the parapet by this man, Jack Barlow. And he says, pointing at her, "I'm coming for you next, Sorengale." This is a good time to mention, Violet is really easy to spot because she always has a gray end of her braid. No matter what she does, no matter how short she cuts her hair, the end of it turns silver. We don't have an explanation for that, but it does. Violet, all of a sudden after this threat, somehow starts moving way faster. Never would have guessed. Jack is gaining on her this whole time, but she barely makes it to the end of the parapet, gets in the building, turns around with a dagger in a hand, and has a knife now literally to his balls. So Jack is still out on the parapet. There's technically walls around him now, but there is a knife at his balls. He is still threatening to kill Sorengale, even though I don't think he's in a position to threaten anyone right now, truthfully. He's on a little beam with a knife somewhere he doesn't want a knife to be. He's going on saying, "You think you're safe in there?" And this is when she starts reciting the Dragon Codex. Because of course she trained to be a scribe. She's memorized about everything there is, so she memorized their codex. In their codex, it says, "It is unlawful for a rider to cause another harm while in quadrant formation or in supervisory presence of a superior ranking cadet, as it will diminish the efficiency of the wing." Jack could care less about this, but the writer behind her taking the names here looks bored as all get out, but just says, "She's right," and proceeds to point out that Jack is not the one winning this fight. So he wisely agrees to not kill Violet as of right this second. And Violet, being our main character, of course she doesn't want to kill anybody quite yet, doesn't kill him. Rhiannon comes up from behind her just saying, "We made it!" And Violet repeats that back with that forced happiness that us chronically ill girlies know so well, saying, "We made it!" But she's also feeling like crap right now. She's feeling nauseous, her knee is bruising way more than any normal person's knees would be bruising from just taking a little fall like she did. This is when Dane sees her. Now Dane, her childhood best friend, who has had no contact with the outside world for a year, was not expecting to see Violet, his childhood best friend who was trained to be a scribe their whole lives, in the writer's quadrant right now, looking like she's about to throw up. Had no outside communication because all first years, all cadets are not allowed to communicate with anybody outside of the writer's quadrant. No letters, no anything. He walks over to her just saying, "What the hell are you doing here?" And then her knees go weak and she starts to fall over, so he brushes her out of sight of everybody else so she doesn't look weak in front of everybody else. Because if you look weak and you look like you could make your wing weak, then they're gonna want to kill you. I'll explain what the wing is in a second. Rhiannon follows Violet and is just confused on who the hell this random man is, who is all of a sudden taking charge of Rhiannon's new best friend. She's getting protective over Violet. Violet finally chimes in saying, "He's my childhood best friend. It's fine." Dane also adds in second year writer, meaning he has some rank over both of them because they are both just cadets. His attention then goes back to Violet. He's making sure that she is just actually just a little sore, not that injured, that she's gonna be okay. He's also checking that she trusts Rhiannon. Once she confirms this to him, Dane then turns to Rhiannon and goes, "I'm Dane Atos. I'm the leader of 2nd Squad, Flame Section, 2nd Wing." Which means that Dane is a squad leader. Violet is completely taken aback by this because being a squad leader as a second year means you have done a very good job. Okay, so to break this down, there are 4 wings with 3 sections with 3 squads in each section. Making sense? So, you would have 1st wing, 2nd wing, 3rd wing, 4th wing. And in each of those, you have a claw section, a tail section, and a flame section. And then, in each of those sections, you have section 1, 2, or 3. And then those squads within each section are about 15 to 20 people. Anyways, now that we have all of that covered, Xaden tells Rihanna to go tell this redhead that is keeping the role to put both of them in his squad section. In the squad. I can't be a dragon rider. After these two finally trade back boots, Dane goes into overprotective mode and is like, we need to get you to the scribe quadrant right now. Violet, on the other hand, basically just says, good luck with that, my mom wants me here, I'm gonna be stuck here. They go back to his dorm so she can wrap her knee in private to not, again, look weak in front of everybody. She's not supposed to be in his dorm room right now, but she is. And now that everything's finally calmed down, she looks at him and she goes, oh my word, my childhood crush got even hotter. Because obviously, she had a crush on him as a kid. And from the way Dana's looking at her, she's thinking maybe we're both finally on the same page about this thing. After some flirty dialogue, Dane says, cool, great, so we actually do really need to get you out of here. Because you are weak and frail from your chronic illness and you stand no chance. Okay, buddy, look, it's okay when me, another chronically ill girly, points this out, but you can't do it yourself. It's actually annoying. You've done it like 55 times now in the last 2 seconds, and you've seen her for a total of 2 seconds. She just says, so I did just cross the parapet the exact same way you did to get here, so maybe I'm not as weak and fragile as you think. There's no way we're getting me out of here. Let me try and stop trying to protect me and just help me. Keeps going on and begging her to let him save her, and she finally just ends it saying, you can't. They sneak back down to the courtyard with everybody else. Rihanna instantly runs up to her with her new best friend Tara, who is also her new crush as well. Win-win. Then finally the opening ceremony, welcome to the cool kids Dragon Rider Club announcement thing happens. They give a welcome, you didn't die, we're so proud of you. Then they get sorted into their wing section and squads. Xaden is one of the wing leaders, but luckily, he's the 4th wing leader, so it's not going to be a problem because Dane is in 2nd wing, and that's where she is as well. Xaden is just staring Violet down, and then starts talking to the 2nd wing leader. Then, all the other wing leaders join in. When they break up this conversation, Xaden is smiling, smirking, at Violet now. One of the wing leaders then says, Dane Atos, your squad will now swap with Anna Be-in-Heaven's squad. I never have to say her name again, so we're not gonna worry about my pronunciation, are we? No. They're walking over. Violet's like, this is weird, but surely it's not that bad. Until she realizes the other squad is coming from the 4th wing, meaning Xaden is now going to be her wing leader, meaning Xaden is now the highest authority over her, basically. Unfortunately for Violet, there is not really a way now to stay away from Xaden. The only rule Violet is able to follow is to stay with Dane. Xaden then starts his speech about how they're all cadets now and they must feel really badass right now, right? Everybody's cheering, woo! And then at least 5 giant, at least 20-foot tall dragons fly in. And they perch right on the walls. They're real close to all the cadets now. And all of a sudden, the cadets stop cheering because as much as we all want to have a pet dragon, these dragons are terrifying. A cadet tries to run and then a dragon scorches them. They're a pile of ash now. Violet at this point decides, I'm just gonna close my eyes. And then there's a couple more blasts of fire. No one's running anymore because if you try to run, you die. The dragons murder you. Seagal is there. She's chilling out with these dragons. She is also the most terrifying dragon there. Just take a guess at whose dragon she is. The next day, they're all about to head to their first class when Dane pulls Violet aside to talk to her in a common area but behind a statue so nobody will see them. He's still being really overprotective, but he does confirm to her that Xaden made them go into his wing because Xaden wants her dead. And this is the easiest way to do that. We also learn about Dane's signet power, which is the power that you get from bonding to a dragon. The dragon's energy starts to go through you, and from the combination of your dragon and yourself, you get a specific signet power. And Dane's is mind reading. He has to touch a person's face to be able to read their mind. That's why he isn't killed. Because normally if you're a mind reader, they just off you really, really fast. Because if you can just look at people and read their minds, if a government trying to keep control, that's not gonna go too well. They don't like that, and they just right then and there. Violet heads out from their hiding spot only to see Xaden standing at the top of the staircase looking down at them. And the only way I can picture this is like, this is so bizarre. Sharpay Evans in High School Musical when she's above the cafeteria and just is like hands on the rail singing, "This is not what I want." For some reason I have the mental image of Xaden standing there like that, not singing, but like standing in that same fashion, just like, he's just on the top of the stairs though. We're not gonna get mixed with my strange imagination and what the book says. Xaden is just standing at the top of the stairs. They are in a staring contest now. Then Dane comes out. Violet's like, "Look up there." He does, and he just says, "Run, Violet." So she runs. But not before Xaden can say to Dane, "I didn't think you would make your feelings so obvious, Atos." She does make it to battle brief without getting murdered, so that's a win in her book at this point. In that class, they just go over past and recent battles to strategize, like battle brief. In today's class, they're talking about a battle that recently happened when the wards went down for a little bit. Now, there are these magical wards over the whole land where it only allows dragons' power to be useful. Outside of the wards, there's a bunch of other people, and there's also griffin riders who also have magic, but they're not really useful in attacks inside of Navarian because the griffins' powers don't work. But when the wards go down, their powers work again in this land, so they attacked. The main thing everybody is concerned about in this class is that the wards were down. Not the attack, the wards were down, which most of the class has not heard about before. This is new information to them. Violet has been told to keep a low profile in this class, but nobody's asking the questions she wants to ask. So Violet tells Rhiannon her question to get her to ask that. It does get them on the right train of thought, and Violet's like, "Cool, I got away with it." And then the teacher says to her, "Next time you have a question, Violet, maybe you'll want to ask it yourself." She, in fact, did not get away with it. The professor then has her continue down this train of thought a little more. Jack the whole time is making fun of her for this. Who knows why, but he's decided that her train of thought is stupid. Only for the professor to confirm that Violet is 100% correct. Xaden then kind of answers the question of why they were attacking is because they were looking for something. They don't know what something, but the Griffin Riders are clearly trying to find something that is inside these wards that they need. They're now all in the sparring gym. Violet and Rhiannon are very much enjoying the view of most of the men being shirtless. All of the men being shirtless, and keep in mind they have trained to be riders for years, so basically all of them are jacked. They're in this conversation, and then finally, after Sawyer and Riddick are done sparring, they come over and start talking to them as well. Just know, from here on out, these three are Violet's main friends in her squad. There's some other members, but we really don't hear from them that much. That's why they don't have a picture up here, and these three do. After they're all talking for a bit, they realize they're really bad in history, all three of them, and she's really bad at sparring. So they make a deal that if Violet helps them with history, they'll teach her how to actually spar so she doesn't die. Because again, you can just murder people at this school. Even if you're just sparring, you could just decide, I'm gonna take it a step further and murder. And to prove this point, Jack, our friendly guy Jack here in the background, decides to break somebody's neck. Everyone is very much shocked because they weren't supposed to be using that much force today. This was just kind of to get an overview from the professor in here, but now there's a dead kid. And then Violet is called onto the mat with Imogen, also one of the marked ones here. Now, what is a marked one? Well, Xaden is one of them. It is all rebellion children. They all had a relic put on them. This is his little tattoo that goes up here. She has one. Garrick has one. Bodhi. Anybody who has a parent that was involved in the rebellion has a mark on them somewhere showing that. It's like a not-so-secret club, except it's a trauma bond because all their parents died. Isn't that fun? And then to really stick it to them, the government decided to relic up all the children, which is basically just a tattoo, but magic? Anyways, Violet, whose mom was kind of in charge of most of these kids' parents dying, is called up to the mat against Imogen, a second year whose parent is dead because of her mother. This should go real well. Violet does hold her own for a little bit, honestly. She's trying to make Imogen mad to make her mess up, but that doesn't end up working all the way, and then Imogen ends up pinning her. And then Violet refuses to yield, and then Violet's arm is broken, and pulled out of socket. So, a really good first day. She kind of blacks out a little. Dane rushes her over to the healer's quadrant so they can start healing her. Now, once they get to the healer's quadrant, Dane is telling them not to mend her, which is the fancy dragon healing power that some riders get. The reasoning for this, that is, if she's too injured, she can't continue to be a dragon rider, so then they can convince her mom to let her go be a scribe. Violet says, I'm not going. She then takes some pain meds and is obviously a little bit out of it and is now slurring everything she says. Nolan, a healer that has been healing her for most of her life because she did grow up around this college, she just wasn't really allowed to see where the dragon riders were especially, comes in and says, of course I'll mend you. Even though this guy up here thinks you're too cool for that. Dane is still begging her to leave and just go to the scribes, and she says, I'm not leaving the dragon quadrant. Dane, thank goodness, is then kicked out of the room because he wouldn't have stayed this long with anybody else. They then mend her back up and she does pass out just a little bit from the pain of the mending, so. She's having a great first day. She gets back to the barracks where she's sleeping with all the other first-year cadets and some of them that had to do it over, like Sawyer. This is actually his second year of being a first-year cadet because a dragon did not bond to him last time because there's not always enough dragons to bond to the amount of riders in the college. Anyways, she's back. She has a sling that she's going to wear when she can, but she's probably not going to wear it much because it makes her look weak. It's a common theme. She doesn't want to look weak. But when she does look at her bed, she notices there is a book on her pillow that says The Book of Brennan. And this is her older brother's guide that he had made for Mira when she was going through the Dragon Riders Quadrant. Mira had obviously left this book and a note just saying, glad you lived. She's reading through the start of some of this book, but the most important detail she gets right now is that the sparring matches that seem to be picked randomly on the day are not picked right then and there. They are predetermined quite a bit in advance. And she has a plan on how to not die in these sparring matches all of a sudden. Violet, a few nights later, is out after curfew now in a black cloak picking up some poison berries. That's right, she's going to start poisoning people she's fighting. In a school where murder is fine, I think poisoning them where they're going to have an upset stomach isn't all that bad. Violet has now picked her berry. She's coming back down the tree when she sees none other than Xaden and Imogen walking towards her, also in black cloaks. It's the dress code of the night. She decides, maybe I should stay hidden. I'm out after curfew, first of all. Also, Xaden's here and he wants to kill me, so I'm gonna stay hidden in the tree and not die right now. And then, even more people show up, and you guessed it, black cloaks. And everybody in this group are marked ones like Xaden. Which is not good, because marked ones are not allowed to meet in groups larger than 3 by law. They are breaking a law by meeting in this large of a group, and Violet is just a sitting duck watching this happen. Violet then moves closer so she can hear what they're talking about, thinking she's gonna hear some horrible plan, but it actually just ends up being Xaden and some of the older riders making sure that the younger marked ones know what's going on and seeing if they need help in any aspect of training. The reasoning for this really is because all marked ones were forced to try to be riders. Most likely because becoming a rider, you have the highest risk of dying, so it wasn't that big of a risk for the government to let them go in here. But then apparently the government didn't think about the fact that if they did succeed, then they would be very, very high ranking in any army. But they also trust the dragons to be smart enough to not bond with people who go against plans that they want to have. Violet's sitting there just thinking, I mean, they're not doing anything wrong. The only thing they're doing wrong is meeting in a bigger group than 3, but I'm not going to tell anybody because they would get in so much trouble for a stupid reason. They all leave, and once Violet is sure they are all gone, she comes out. And she's just so happy to have her berries. And then boom, she's being choked by somebody who has now pulled them against their hard chest. She knows it's Xaden because he says scream and you die. And then from his shadow powers, that's right, Xaden is one of the many beloved. I just need everybody to know I don't use this terminology in real life, but for the internet's sake, and since he is called this by so many other people, this is one of the Xaden is, yes, one of the shadow daddies of book talk. And because of these shadow powers, he can tell it's Violet. And he says, f***ing Sorengale. He drops her and then just says, I may actually have to kill you now. Actually. Violet proceeds to get in a pathetic fighting stance over here. Xaden's just standing there going, oh no, scary. She then throws a couple of her knives, missing his head. He's like, that's the best you got. She then tells him to back up. When he does, the knives are right next to his head in the tree trunk. She then says, tell me again that I missed. This is where Xaden says one of his many famous lines from this book, saying, fascinating. You look all frail and breakable, but you're really a violent little thing, aren't you? And then proceeds to call her violence for the rest of the book. The rest of the book series, actually. She's now thinking they are way too close because the book talk girlies always think that when they're close to their hot enemy. Xaden makes a comment then about how she should show that trick to Jack Barlow. Violet's just standing there confused on how she is not dead right now. He then asked in many, many ways if she's going to tell anybody about this little club meetup, and she says no to all of them. Continuing on to say there was nothing wrong with this gathering, you were just helping them. He just replies, interesting. Well, if you keep your word, I guess I owe you a favor. She then, even more confused now, says, you're not going to handle me? He says, I could, but it's not fun when you're expecting it. And as he's leaving, he says, now get back to the barracks before your wing leader finds out you're out after curfew. Leaving her to shout back, you are my wing leader! Violet is so happy to have her poisoned, but she is hella confused about what just happened. She was 100% sure that Xaden wanted to murder her, but Xaden had the perfect opportunity to murder her and proceeded to say, I owe you a favor. I don't know what that would do to your mindset, but that would leave me very confused as well. Violet's up the next day thinking about how seeing Dane is the best part of her day, which leaves every reader confused because every time she talks to Dane, he's just telling her to get out of here and go to the scribe unit, and they are always arguing. In all honesty, I don't even think there's one small attempt from this book to try to convince us this is a love triangle. We all know that she is choosing the Shadow Daddy. Anyways, Violet runs into Dane and Rihanna is giving them all the tea on her sex life. Dane does not want to be hearing about this. Violet is just accepting that this is who Rihanna is. Anyways, she's on her way to breakfast duty where she will be putting poison into the food of the person she's fighting today. Cut to the class where we actually learn about dragons. Now, all you really need to know is that Xaden's dragon, Sigale, is freaking terrifying. She is the most terrifying dragon at the school right now, and besides a few on the battlefield, is one of the strongest and, again, scariest dragons there is. Also, no one has ever seen a baby dragon, a feathertail, or they haven't seen one for a very, very, very long time. They are kept in what is called the Vale, where all the dragons live when they're not being used for war and stuff. But the dragons are more in charge of the humans than the humans think they are, you know? The dragons basically just pretend to let the humans be in charge. And there's also this big, giant black dragon that has refused to bond with anybody since his last rider died, which was the rider that tried to revive her brother's Brennan's life when he died. I mean, I'm sure they just mentioned a few random dragons randomly for no apparent reason. Anyways, on to fighting class. Rhiannon is destroying her opponent, as we all thought she would, because she is the best. What can we say? Dane lets Violet know that the guy that Violet's going to be fighting today wants to kill her for the strength of the wing. This is not news to Violet. Everybody wants to kill Violet, of what Violet is aware at this point. She looks over at her opponent and he is not looking so good for some weird reason. And she just says, I think I'll be fine. Rhiannon's opponent then passes out. As Rhiannon is walking away, she grabs one of his daggers, pats them on the head, and says, enjoy your nap. Violet laughs at this. Jack over here just can't stand that Violet is laughing, though, and has to say something. So he snaps, not sure why you're laughing, Sorengale. She tries to just ignore him, but then she thinks about what Xaden says, and proceeds to throw a couple knives at him. One, again, right below the balls, and one right next to his head. Dane says, what the hell? Violet just explains, laying low wasn't helping. She's now on the mat fighting. The guy she's fighting says, I'm so sorry for having to kill you. She ends up beating the guy. He ends up throwing up as well. She takes a dagger and we're all happy. She didn't die. It's going well. Violet is beating her opponents week after week after week until one week she poisons them a little too early. and they end up getting sick before the match, and so Xaden volunteers to fight her. Zane tries to argue with this, but obviously that doesn't work because Xaden is also his wing leader. The whole fight is more of a teaching moment, so it goes exactly how you would expect, with Xaden constantly beating her and slowly disarming her dagger after dagger after dagger after dagger. One time, while Xaden has her pinned on the mat, he whispers, "Taking out your enemies before the battle is really smart, I'll give you that." He knows. And then the last time Xaden has her pinned down, she can't help but notice how beautiful he is. He then tells her to get her last dagger and goes on explaining, "You're tiny, stop going for the big moves. A rib shot would have worked just fine." And then guiding her hand, he says, "Kidneys are a good fit from this angle. The book can't help but be a book talk book every once in a while." It says, "I swallow, refusing to think of other things that are a good fit at this angle." Mind you, he is basically laying on top of her on the floor. So I'll let you use your imaginations for that one. Don't have to get too creative. Zane, who is either insanely protective or insanely jealous right now, finally says, "Okay, that's enough." Xaden just grumbles something about Dane being overprotective and then guides her dagger back into the hilt, and she can't help but think, hot. Violet is now in Dane's room that night. He is helping massage out her sore muscles from the Xaden beatdown earlier today. And of course, we get back on the topic of him wanting to get her to the Scribes Quadrant. And he's talked with them and has them agreeing that they wouldn't tell her mom until she was a year in and officially a scribe, so there's nothing she could do to change it. She's fed up at this point and finally snaps, and they finally actually argue about this. He's going on about how he thinks she isn't good enough, about how he thinks she is a liability to the wing, how he thinks that she is weak. And of course, Dana's like, no, I don't see you that way, but others do. And he says, "I can't watch you die, Violet. Just promise me you'll think about it." She agrees to think about it. All right, it is now time to go through the Gauntlet. Here's a picture of what the Gauntlet looks like because, like so many readers of Fourth Wing, this is a place where I don't know if it's Rebecca's writing or our horrible visuals we've had growing up, but all I can think about is a cross between the American Ninja Warrior course and Wipeout. And I don't think I'm that wrong with the American Ninja Warrior course, but when you start picturing the big red balls in there, I don't think that's right. So here's a picture. They're going to be training going up this. It's a vertical obstacle course. There's ropes on the side they can use, which is honestly shocking that they would give that, but I mean, you can still die on these practice tests. It's what they use to get their time for presentation day, where they walk in a straight line down across all the dragons to see if any of the dragons like them or if the dragons want to kill them that day. And there's also that option. Anyways, we're just training on it right now. Now, a girl in their wing named Arielle is so ready for this. Her dad made a little course at home. She's pumped. She can't wait. And then the professor who is about to let them run this course is saying, "Wow, your squad leader must be so proud because nobody in your squad has died yet." It's like the frickin' football announcers when they talk about how good a kicker has been all year and then they miss the field goal. I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but I mean, I might be implying something is about to happen. Tynan, a guy in their squad, is talking about how this is gonna weed out the weaklings looking at Violet. Now, Sawyer, Riddick, Rihanna are not too happy about this. Sawyer and Riddick, in their normal fashion, are joking about trying to make the mood a little lighter, and Sawyer is going first since he has done this whole gauntlet thing before and nobody else has. He goes right up, no problem. And then a couple other people go. Finally, Violet goes and Arielle is following her. Tynan got up most of the way, but then got stuck on a section and actually had to take the rope down, so maybe we should stop smack-talking people and focus on our own gauntlet run, shouldn't we, Tynan? Violet is once again reciting a bunch of random knowledge to herself out loud. Arielle is I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but Arielle is behind her, just talking about how fun this is, and then she goes over this point where they're jumping on these spinning logs. Violet gets over to look back to watch Arielle fall to the ground and die. I don't have a picture, but R.I.P. Violet continues on after being scarred by this. She gets stuck at this chimney portion where she has to put her arms and legs out on both sides and go up, but she is just so short and tiny and little, it doesn't work for her. She's outside the next night thinking, How is she going to get up this chimney? She couldn't do it today. She just had a squad member dying. She's not having a great time. But then Xaden, Garrick, and Bodhi all get back from a night flight they were taking for some reason. She doesn't know why they would be flying out at night, but third year Sphinx. She's not gonna question it. Xaden stops to talk with her, and Violet doesn't even bother to question him about where he's been, which is shocking to Xaden. He now knows something is wrong with this girl. She admits that she is thinking of running away right now, and it would really help her make up her mind if Xaden could confirm if he's going to kill her or not. Xaden, in true Xaden fashion, just says, I haven't decided yet. Thanks, buddy. He's exhausted and just says, I just need to know what my chances are. And he quips back saying, that is the strangest way I have ever been hit on. She's a little fed up. She starts walking away just saying, no, not with you. He then grabs her wrist and pulls her back. Xaden now gets serious about this conversation and coaxes the answer out of her. She admits that after living through all of this, she can't even get up the gauntlet, and she doesn't know what to do at this point. They then go back and forth on if Xaden actually cares about any of this. It's a fight they had to have at some point, okay? Violet finally accepts that maybe this very hot man doesn't actually want her dead. A shocking turn of events. The enemies are going to be lovers? What? And she admits she got hopeful, but now she's not sure. Xaden then just goes, oh, so you lose one squad mate, you can't get up the gauntlet. I mean, I can see why you don't want to talk about this with anyone. It's a pretty pathetic picture. They then go back and forth. He goes on this inspirational speech about hope and how many people want her dead. Interesting choice, but okay, we're going with it. And then shadows start to wrap around her, and a shadow might caress her cheek. Cool? What? He then ends this and says, you're defying the odds, and it's rather inspiring to watch. Okay, she's leaving now, and he just says, the right way isn't always the only way. It is now presentation day, where they're going to go up the gauntlet. They're all going to be timed together as a squad. And then the best ranking squad will get to go through presentation first, where all the dragons get to look at them. It's kind of, some of the humans try to view it as that the dragons are presenting themselves, but it's really more for the dragons to pick their riders. It's like the Harry Potter wands, where the wand picks the user, the wizard. The dragon picks the rider. It's not the other way around, even though some of them want to act like it is. On their way there, you'll never guess what Dane talks to Violet about. He talks to her about going to the scribes. At this point in the book, anytime I see Dane's freaking name show up on the page, I want to skip it because I'm done. I'm sick of it. I'm over it. She once again is like, no, I'm not going to the scribes. Okay. She is on her way up the gauntlet. It's going great. She gets to the chimney and then she grabs one of the ropes and she's allowed to grab it. It's going to be a 30-second penalty, but she gets that over where she can use that to help herself get up in a way, shimmy up in some way. So she does that, but the chimney wasn't her only problem, because after the chimney, there is basically like in American Ninja Warrior, that warp wall they have to run up, there's one of those, and she is very short and a little weak. We know this. So she starts running at this warp wall. Right when gravity starts to bring her back down, she gets one of the daggers that she brought with her, stabs it in, and pulls herself up the rest of the way. And somehow this all works. She makes it up. Right when she gets up, Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Riddick all run over to her. They're celebrating. They're so happy. And then Amber, this other squad leader, comes over talking about, that's against the codex. You're not allowed to bring anything on the gauntlet. That's not allowed. You just broke a rule. Violet's like, yeah, I know, I'll get the 30-second penalty. And about the knife, according to the codex, the knife that I brought over is part of my person. The part she's referring to says, a rider may only bring to the quadrant the items they can carry, and they shall not be separated from those items no matter what they may be. For once carried across the parapet, they are considered part of their person. Article 3, Section 6, Addendum B. Now, the codex was written this way to make thievery an execution-worthy cause. But it also meant that anything you brought over is considered part of your person, so by using a dagger she brought over, she only used things that were part of her person. Amber is just going on and on about how that's not what that means, blah, blah, blah. And Xaden is just standing over there smirking, saying, she got you, Amber. It is now Violet's squad's turn to go walk in front of these dragons that average about 25 feet of height. They're advised to stand 7 feet apart, so if one of the dragons decides that one of the members is not worthy of being a dragon rider and just kills them on the spot, that they won't also get burned to death. And rumor is there's a little golden dragon that may be a Feathertail at the end of this presentation line. Nobody's really that shocked because they don't think it's an actual Feathertail, and also dragons are gonna do what dragons want to do. They're advised to talk while they walk in front of these giant dragons so the dragons can get a feel of their personality, and Tynan can't help but make a comment about how he's trying to find the dragon he wants to bond during threshing, even though that's not how this works. Luckily, Violet and Rhiannon are close together, so they start talking about Rhiannon's soon-to-be niece or nephew, and they also agree to let each other know if the other person needs help, if it's something they can help with, because her feelings were a little hurt because Violet did not tell her about her plans to get up the gauntlet. And then they reach the end, and there is the tiny little golden dragon. Couldn't support a rider, so Tynan decides to make a joke about it, and then compares the dragon to Violet, calling her weak. This is when Sawyer jumps in, grabs him, and says, "Don't ever say that about a squad mate in front of dragons." And then their squad mate, Pryor, says, maybe we should go back, or we could just stay here, whatever you guys want to do. This guy has never been able to make a decision in his life, and honestly, same, but I'm getting better. With a very tense group of riders, they start going back through all the dragons, with our main four kind of arguing with Tynan and Luca, the girl on the squad, who is also just not great. Violet then brings up the mythological Venin and Wyvern that they heard about growing up in children's stories. Venin are these red-eyed creatures that would get the magic directly from the source, so take it from the earth, basically. And Wyvern were these two-legged dragon-looking creatures, and she's telling the story about how her mom came home one night with bloodshot eyes and was screaming and crying that she was a Venin, even though Venin are fake in their world. Pryor jumps in saying, maybe we should slow down or speed up. I don't know. What do you guys want to do? And then a dragon kills him on the spot. So that dragon was really good at making a decision to murder. Again, don't have a picture of him, but rip. They keep walking over his ashes and all. Then a little bit later, two green dragons come up to Violet, sniffing her intently. Everybody thinks Violet is about to be torched, about to be ashes, no remains. And then she realizes that they're just sniffing her dragon armor, and she explains it's Mira's dragon, and that Mira got the scales when her dragon was shedding this summer. The dragons eventually back up and keep walking. Luca is in the middle of another mean comment towards Violet, and then a dragon torches her as well, so doesn't really pay to be a bully in front of the dragons, clearly. Again, don't have a picture, but RIP. It's gonna be a phrase I'm tired of. Alright, so you know this book about dragon riders that we've been talking about for the past who knows how long right now? We're finally getting to the point where we get to see the dragons up close, personal. She is getting her dragon today, supposedly. It is threshing day. Now, let's do a quick overview of all the different types of dragons there are. We're gonna do this mainly on their colors. There's a bunch of different tail types as well they can have, but their personality is really based off of their color most of the time. Red dragons, they have a shorter temper and are very passionate. Brown dragons like decisive riders. They're a little more relaxed. Blue dragons are absolutely ruthless and want riders that share that same trait. Green dragons are the most patient and bond with those who are intelligent and discerning. Orange dragons like people with a strong will but have a nicer temper than the red dragons. And black dragons are the tippity top of the food chain and will bond with whoever they want. Now, what is threshing? How do they get their dragons during threshing? Threshing is when they take all the cadets who are not dragon riders yet and put them in a field with all the dragons who are open to bond as well. There are no rules in here. Again, you can murder anybody you want to at any time. If they seem like they're going to weaken the wing, it might be time to do that. Or if you just want to get vengeance for somebody right now, here's your chance. Violet has been in the field for a while now. She's up in a tree trying to find where some dragons are, but she's not feeling a pull towards any one of them. They said most likely if you feel a pull, then your dragon is trying to get your attention and calling you towards them, and you should follow that instinct. But she's not feeling that. She's looking around, she's seeing a few dragons, but not really thinking anything of it. And then, like a little beacon in the middle of this open area, she sees the little golden dragon again. And if I'm being honest, this picture probably makes her look a little more fierce than she actually is described in the book. And then she looks and she sees Jack and one of his other friends and Tynan, who is also one of Jack's friends, going off towards the little gold dragon talking about how they want to kill it because it's a weakling. Violet, being Violet, can't stand for this, so she runs off to warn the little golden dragon to hopefully get it to just fly away and save it. But when she gets to it and is telling this little golden dragon to fly away, the golden dragon is like, nah, she's just sitting there, chilling out. So it's not leaving. Leaving Violet, the only option to save this dragon is to fight Jack, Orin, and Tyan all at once. 3 against 1. Oh, and Xaden and Seagal are just sitting on the sidelines watching this because none of the leadership is allowed to interfere with Threshing at all. Totally against the rules. They all start coming at her. She gets a dagger in Jack's arm instantly, and he is not able to use that arm anymore. So he just runs off. As he's running away, he tells the other to kill her. So Orin and Tyan are just staying around, trying to kill her. They've landed a couple hits, nothing fatal. She's done the same to them. At one point, Xaden calls out behind you, so one of them doesn't kill her with a hit from behind. Orin, the other guy, is about to attack her again, and then finally, this little golden dragon snaps its teeth at him, and he's like, well, that's actually a dragon still. A little scary. She knows Tyan has a wound on him that will cause him to bleed out if he doesn't get help soon, but that's not too great because she is basically not able to move anymore with the injuries she has. She's not able to move her leg and doesn't have a lot of strength left in her arms. She at this point has no fight left. Xaden is now about to land a killing blow on Violet. Xaden takes a step forward, but then stops. Tynan also stops, looks up with fear. Violet feels wind from her back, is wondering what's going on right now, only to look over her shoulder and see the massive black dragon that was not going to bond with anybody this year standing behind her that they had learned about in class a few months ago, whose last rider was the one that tried to save her brother. And in her head, she hears, "Step aside, Silver One." The dragons are here! They are here! We are at the good part of the story now! The dragon is speaking to her! The dragon then torches Tynan, and Orin is just laying in front of Violet. The dragon tells her to finish him, but she can't bring herself to do that. She still has not killed anybody. Xaden and Seagal leave now. Violet is taken care of. She then wraps up her wounds as the dragon told her to, and then he says, "Get on my back." This giant beast of a dragon, badass dragon, is choosing Violet Sorrengail, who has repeatedly been called weak, frail, fragile, been told she is never going to be able to make it, now has one of the most respected dragons choosing her. It is just so satisfying. Anybody who has been underestimated, and I think especially the chronically ill people who read these books, and I think that's why some of these books get so much love, because there's so many people with different types of chronic illness, and that can just relate to this, and it makes me cry. It really does. I know it's a book, and I know it's always gonna happen this way, it's just done so well. She finally gets onto this dragon's back, which he does something that most dragons would not do, and makes it easier for her by bowing down so his legs are now like a ramp. Because, mind you, he is giant, at least 25 feet tall, probably taller. He also does this because he did see her memories of stabbing the warp wall to get up it, and doesn't want to be stabbed in the leg by her right now. And once she is on his back, he says, "My name is Ternanok, son of Mercandium and Thaklenfiel, descended from the cunning Dubhubudin." That wasn't even a joke, I just can't say it. Dub Hamedin line. Descended from the cunning Dub Hamedin line. But I'm not going to assume that you will be able to remember that once we reach the field. So Terran will do, until I inevitably have to remind you. Then they take flight, he makes a turn, and Violet goes falling off of his back. Now, a lot of dragons during threshing, if a rider falls off their back, they don't even try to save them, they just let them die. But Terran goes down, catches Violet, and says, "You're making us look bad. Stop." stop it. I feel like you can just see my eyes light up when I get to actually talk about the dragons in this book. The first part of this book, once the dragons are introduced, I am zoned in. This is why I love this book. They quip back and forth on how hard it is to stay on the back of the dragon, and then she says, I'm not as strong as the other riders. And this is when Taryn says, I know exactly who and what you are, Violet Sorengale. Chills every time. Taryn then uses some magic to basically bind her legs to him. Like there's a band around them so she doesn't go flying off. And so that he can do some impressive maneuvers to make everybody think it makes sense for him to choose her. Also, the little golden dragon is following them. She's just having a great time. She then asks him, why did you choose me? And he says, because you saved her. You are the smartest of your year, the most cunning, and strength of courage is more important than physical strength. Now, she had just been thinking on why this dragon chose her, but he's just thinking about things that she is just thinking in her mind. He has full access to her mind and is just reading it. They all land, he bows again to let her slide down. The other dragons basically grumble and mutter about this in dragon speak. Violet then goes to the little golden dragon who landed near them and says, maybe next time someone is trying to save you and tells you to fly away, you listen to them. And then she hears a little female voice in her head say, maybe I was saving you. Now, everybody on the flight field right now has their eyes on Taryn because they know who he is. He has had riders before. Melgern, the general of everybody, who has the only other dragon called Coda that is bigger than Taryn, is just looking at him. No one can say it's him yet because it hasn't been confirmed, but they're all thinking it. Even her own mother is staring, which is the most impressive thing. Violet then goes into the little tent with the roll keeper to give her dragon's full name. So it's marked down somewhere, but you're not really supposed to give anybody else your dragon's full name. That's just for you to know, and apparently the roll keeper. She goes in and tells the roll keeper, Ternanok. The woman is writing the name down, gushing about how badass he is, and then she hears a little voice in her head say, and Andarnam Yuram. Andarna for short. Violet's like, what? Andarna just says, tell her. So Violet says out loud to the roll keeper, and Andarnam Yuram. And the roll keeper's eyes fly open, just saying, both dragons? Then all hell breaks loose because no one has ever bonded two dragons before. Not only did she bond the strongest dragon that said he was not going to bond with anybody this year, she also bonded a second dragon that no one has ever seen one that looks like it before. So basically what happens now is all the higher up people get in a meeting and pretend like they're gonna get to decide if she gets to keep both dragons, but now the Imperium, the Dragon Council, has shown up as well. So all the big bad dragons are going over to talk to each other. They're the ones actually making this decision. Violet during this time finds all her squad mates, Rhiannon, Sawyer, and Riddick. Rhiannon bonded to a green dragon named Virgi. Riddick has a brown swordtail dragon named Artorum. Sawyer has a red swordtail named Sail Siege. I'm rarely gonna say those names, so bear with me. Dane then comes over and he's like, they're going to make you choose. You're not gonna be allowed to have two dragons. So when they make you choose Andarna, because she's so small and weak, she won't bring you to the front lines. Ho, if you don't shut your mouth. No, this is it. This is a new low. This is a new low. She's got the biggest, baddest dragon around, and you're telling her, as much as I love Andarna already, you're telling her to give that up? No, I think you're just insecure about you're not a school dragon. Okay? Says the girl with no dragon, but I think that's the case. Dane then goes on to explain that if she picks Taryn, Xaden will end up getting her killed, because Taryn and Sigale are a mated pair, meaning they're never gonna be able to be apart for long. Meaning these two are going to have some sort of interesting connection because all mated pairs with bonded riders end up having their bonded riders having an interesting connection with each other. So if she picks Taryn, she will be stationed with Xaden, the man she fought that wanted to kill her, for the rest of her life. She explains how everything happened. Dane flips, thinking that Xaden interfered with Threshing to make this happen. Xaden walks over at this point and goes, is that a formal accusation? They're arguing back and forth on if he called this dragon in to save her or did anything to manipulate Threshing. And Xaden finally goes, you're asking the wrong questions. You're not asking if Sigale was there and if Sigale saw all of this, which Sigale did see all of this, so she called Tairn over to help, and Tairn, by his own decision, chose Violet. Dane just says, there are rules. Xaden pushes him and says, and would you have broken those rules to protect your precious little Violet? He pushes some more and says, that's an order. And Dane says no. Mr. Xaden, who before Tairn showed up, was already taking a step towards Violet. The guy who she thought wanted to kill him would have broken the rules to protect her before her own best friend. Dane walks away, and Violet turns on Xaden, asking, why would you do that to him? If I'm Violet at this point, I am so sick of his shit, I would have been like, thanks, man. Xaden just replies, you put too much faith in him. Knowing who to trust is going to keep both of us alive. She says, there is no us. He says, yeah, okay. And then explains that Tairn almost died when his last rider died. And an important thing to know is a dragon without their rider is a tragedy, but a rider without their dragon is dead. So, Tairn almost died when his last rider died. And every bond they have gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Meaning that if Violet dies, now that Tairn is bond with her and already had such a strong bond with his last rider, means that if she dies, he's most likely going down. And then with mated pairs, that means Sigale is most likely going down, which could then lead to Xaden dying, because a rider without their dragon is dead. So yeah, there's an us now. And not that Violet didn't have enough people trying to kill her already, but since she just bonded to the biggest, baddest dragon around, everybody who didn't bond a dragon this year is going to be trying to kill her. Because while their bond is weak, they are hoping that they can kill her, not kill this dragon, and then hopefully this dragon will choose them as its next rider. So yeah, Violet is now target number 1. And Darna and Tairn get back, and she says, is everything okay? And he just says, it's as it should be. Tairn is not happy with all this fanfare. He just wants his rider to be able to have 2 dragons and for it not to be a big deal. So, they all get to stay bonded, and then she gets her dragon relic magicked on her by the dragon, which is basically like a cool, quick dragon tattoo that they put on. It's also kind of where the power will store the magic that she's going to get from the dragon. So it's got other purposes, but its main purpose is a sick tattoo. And hers is of a big black dragon with its wingspan spread out with a little golden dragon in the center of it. It's very cute. Here's a photo. Dane comes over to help her unlace so she can actually see the relic tattoo, because she has a way of seeing through Tairn's eyes with their connection. Dane is explaining why he said what he said, blah, blah, blah. She just says it's fine. Honestly, she's not even believing that it's fine, but she says it just to get him to shut up. After she views her relic, it's so cool. They're standing there, and Dane, with his hand on her face, you know how I feel about you, and then kisses her. Problem is, she feels nothing. No sparks, 0. Not a thing. Her leg did not pop. But after the kiss, Dane obviously did feel something. Next morning, Rhiannon and Sawyer come out of the same room. Apparently they hooked up. And all riders now get private rooms. When you're just a cadet, you're in the barracks. But when you're a rider, you get a private room. They were just celebrating. This isn't a relationship thing happening. It's just a lot of people hooked up last night. It's a war college. Focus on college real fast. Rhiannon's like, so, were you celebrating of Dane? And she's like, no, we actually kissed and, it sucked. They're getting breakfast. She's walking towards a table. Everybody clears room for her, which is really weird. They used to have to squeeze in somewhere, but they are making room for her to sit down. And this is because Violet is now top of the hierarchy here. Out of everybody, out of even 2nd or 3rd years, she has the best dragon out of everybody. So now she is on top of the food chain. Now Jack Barlow is kind of getting pushed to the side a little bit because he bonded a red dragon, but like it's not anything special. And then Imogen and Quinn, who are in their squad, come to sit with them as well. And they're all like, what are you doing here? You have never sat with us before. And they just say, we don't get attached to first years until they've bonded a dragon. It saves us a lot of heartache. Imogen is also now going to help Violet train up her leg strength in the gym so she can actually stay on her dragon. Xaden has clearly asked her to do this. Violet's thinking maybe, just maybe, something is going on between these two. Now, they're at flight lessons again. She's flying with Tairn in the front of the pack. He's still using the magic to hold her on so she doesn't fall off. She asks him to loosen his restraints a little. He does, and she goes falling right off. He catches her and just is grumbling. She's asking, what does that mean? And Taryn says the closest human translation would be, for f***'s sake. She falls a lot more in flying lessons. She's talking to Dane after this flight and is honestly not so happy to see him, but she's chatting. Dane is now going on about the kiss and how it never should have happened, and she's like, oh my goodness, yes, I agree. And he's like, you know, maybe after we're out of college, but it can't be happening right now. And she's like, ooh, so. Before Violet can say that out loud, Imogen comes over and saves her and says, let's go train. And just tells Dane, squad loyalty, you know? Now, Violet has a new chore she does every day. Everybody in the writer's quadrant has one. She used to be on breakfast duty, but now that's been handed down to lower ranking cadets, aka the unbonded. So now she's going to the scribe quadrant every morning to get any books or mail that has been sent over for them. Jacinia, somebody she trained with when she thought she was going to go into the scribe quadrant, is there to get the books. Yes, she is the one who apparently wrote Fourth Wing, or the history of Fourth Wing. Not actually, but you know, in book lore. They're catching up all in sign language because Jacinia is deaf of what we're aware. As she's about to go look for all the other book, Violet asks her if she would also be able to look for this book called Fables of the Baron. This is a book she owns. She wanted to bring it with her, but wasn't able to since Mira said, you're not carrying books over just so you can fall off with them. Jacinia gets back and she goes, we don't have that book. We also don't have anything that you were talking about that's in that book, like Venin or Wyvern or anything like that. Violet's like, weird, but she makes it to breakfast just fine. Now, they've had a couple more people move to their squad. A couple of squads have been dissolved since there's not as many people left anymore since so many people have died. But since Dane's squad was the Iron Squad, most people alive still, Dane gets to stay in charge and just gets a few more people moved over to his squad. And then the ones that were moved over without relics don't like being around those with relics, so they're awkwardly sitting at another table. Not many people have problems with that in this writer college, but some still do. And also everybody outside of the writer college definitely does. Now, it's only a few weeks later now, but Sawyer has already found out his signet power. He can manipulate metals, bend them. All the other first years are, of course, jealous because they're all waiting. Quinn's like, it's fine, just hope it manifests before 6 months or boom. Imogen's just sitting there going, and don't scare them. That hasn't happened in decades. I think we're gonna be fine. After another flight lesson where she only falls 12 times, Dane comes over to talk to her. Now, Taryn is still right behind her and says to her to tell him, if you harm me, he'll scorch the ground where you stand. That's why we love him so much. He's the best dragon. He goes on this big rant about how she didn't tell him that she couldn't keep her seat during flights and that she should have told him, and they argue about just about everything. Let's get one thing straight. The reason we will never be anything more than friends is because I have bonded not one, but 2 dragons, but you still think I won't make it. So forgive me, but you are about to be some of the bullshit that this place cuts away from me. She then storms off and Xaden is just arching an eyebrow as she passes by. And then some random writer comes running out of the building, pointing at people, saying exactly what they're thinking. This is what they call an intensic, a mind reader. Unlike Dane, he can't control when he reads minds. So Professor Carr comes out and snaps his neck. Violet's asleep in bed one night, dreaming, and then Taryn's voice cuts into her dream saying, wake up before you die. She wakes up to 7 people in her room. She has to jump out of the way of a sword coming down on her. Luckily, she's wearing her armor because it does hit her, but it just bounces off of the dragon scales. Now, the one place people are supposed to be safe in this college is when they are sleeping. You are not allowed to attack people when they are sleeping. But they're doing it anyways, all 7 of them. She's getting a couple of daggers. One woman is running out of this room now, leaving 6 people here at least. But Violet recognizes the woman that just ran out of this room. Violet is fighting them off. She's going for non-killing blows. Taryn is just saying, he's almost there. Violet asks, who's almost here? Now Orin has her cornered with a knife to her throat when the door flies open and Xaden is standing at the other edge of the room. But he's not going to be able to get to her in time before Orin can just slice her throat open. This is when Andarna screams, mine! And everybody but Violet freezes. So Violet runs over to stand next to Xaden now and get away from the knife. And then everybody resumes what they were doing. Xaden looks at her for just a millisecond, then looks at everybody else and gets down to business. He proceeds to use his shadow powers to kill everybody in the room. Because trying to kill somebody in their sleep is an executioner-worthy offense. Garrick shows up and just goes, I see, no time for questioning. Violet's just thinking, I'm alive, I'm alive, I'm alive. Xaden then says, yes, you're alive, out loud. He then gets her to calm down enough to tell him what's wrong. She explains that she got hit on her ribs with a sword. Luckily, she thinks it's just bruised, but it could be broken. He just arches a brow and says, that must have been a pretty dull sword. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that you're sleeping in your vest. Taryn then tells her, trust him. So she explains what the vest is made of. It's made out of dragon scales, in case you forgot. After the help gets all the bodies out of the room, Xaden shuts the door so they can check on her ribs to make sure it's just bruised and not broken. Which involves him unlacing her corset, which of course he has to make a comment about how he knows his way around corsets, cause yeah. Once they can see them, they realize the ribs are just bruised like they thought, so luckily she's all good. He then kneels down in front of her to help her get her shoes on, and she's just standing there thinking, I could run my hands through his hair. Okay. He starts walking with her. She's like, where are we going? And he says, stop asking her, we won't be able to get there before we're caught. She's like, why don't you just use your shadows? Xaden just says, oh, yeah, no, a giant blob of shadow going down the hallway is a lot less conspicuous than a couple. She's just thinking, we're not a couple. And then continues on with Violet's favorite thought of, not that I wouldn't climb this man like a tree presented the right opportunity. Girl, just say you have a crush on this man for everybody, please. End up walking down some stairs somewhere that leads to storage, but it actually leads to a secret tunnel. They end up on the topic of how she's not even safe when she's sleeping, and before Xaden can even say anything, Violet says, don't even think about sleeping with me to keep me safe. Girl, he did not imply that he was going to do that. You were fantasizing about that in your head. Admit it. Xaden then jumps ahead another couple steps and says, I wasn't suggesting that and I wouldn't hook up with you. I don't sleep with first year. I didn't even when I was a first year, and I especially wouldn't sleep with you. Ouch. Okay, we didn't need to go that far, Xaden. We could have just stopped it with I don't sleep with first years. I feel like we got a little too personal there. That hurt my own feelings. She pipes back and is like, that's not what I was saying. She was absolutely thinking it though. They now get to the flight field through this secret tunnel, and Xaden goes right up to Taryn and says, what the hell happened? What was that time freezing thing? Xaden and Darna are also there. It's a whole family meeting. Taryn says in both of their heads, none of your business. Mated dragons can talk to the other dragons bonded person. Writer. Does that make sense? So like, Xaden should be able to talk to Violet, and Taryn is obviously able to talk to Xaden because of them being mates. Now, Taryn and Xaden are arguing. Violet eventually jumps in to call Tear down, saying, he's just freaked out. Don't torch him. And this is when Violet hears Sigale's voice for the first time saying, at least we agree on something. And Darna finally chimes into just Violet saying a whole bunch of random stuff, but eventually says, Feathertails don't bond because they can't channel magic to their rider. But she can give her gift directly to Violet. This is the first confirmation we have had that Andarna is not just a small random dragon, she is actually a baby dragon, a Feathertail. They are not supposed to be out of the veil, but she is. Xaden is then betrayed because he was told that Andarna is a Feathertail and thought Sigale was hiding a baby from him. Sigale just explains that Andarna lost her parents, so her, Taryn, and the rest of the dragon group honestly just all take care of her, but she really took a liking to Sigale and Taryn. And then Andarna confirms to Violet that she can stop time, just for a little bit. Then Violet tells Xaden, and they're both just standing there because nobody has ever had a signet like this. It's not a signet, it is just Andarna giving Violet some of her power, but still. No one's had the power to manipulate time. The dragons leave so Andarna can rest, and Xaden and Violet agree to tell no one about the Feathertail's Andarna's powers. As they're walking back down, Violet says, there was a rider there trying to kill me, but you're not gonna believe me when I tell you who it is. And she means it. She thinks he will not believe her. He just says, at some point we're going to have to trust each other, so tell me who. The next morning, Xaden comes over to talk to Dane. Now Violet's heart starts racing at the sight of Xaden. She just can't contain her little self over here. She is down bad for Xaden, and can anybody blame her? No, not really. But Xaden is just informing Dane that there's been a change to his squad and he will be acquiring Liam Mari. Oh, You're gonna love him. Now, Liam is a first year. He's also a marked one. He is built like a bull. He was the fastest up the gauntlet and has just been basically the best at everything. And is now, obviously, Violet's personal bodyguard and will be with her 24/7. His dorm room is even now right next to hers. She tries to tell Xaden, I don't need a bodyguard. And he just says, we both learned last night that I can't always be there to protect you. But Liam here can. So hopefully you get used to him. Xaden walks away, and Dane just mutters, fucking mated dragons. Dane then turns on Violet as Xaden has gone over to talk to one of the professors about something, and notices the hand marks on her neck from where she was getting choked last night from the attack. And then he starts causing a scene by going, why didn't you tell me? She just says, later. Finally, the professor Xaden was talking to says, there's been a breach in the codex. Xaden then climbs up to make the accusation against Amber for leading the attack on Violet last night in her room while she was sleeping. And then Dane jumps up to Amber's defense because Amber is just a girl version of Dane who worships the codex and lives by it. So why would she ever break a rule like that? He looks at Violet saying, tell them this isn't true. She confirms it is. And he looks at her and says, give me your memory, with his hand reaching out already to touch her face to get it himself. Now she knows she cannot let him see his memory because of the memory she has of Indarna and the power she can get from her now. Now, luckily, she gets Dane to stop doing that because Taryn will be able to show everybody her memory. So he flies down and projects it in front of everyone, showing Amber running away from her room after she tried to kill her. And of course, that means Amber is dead. Now, Violet actually has a change of heart and doesn't want Amber to die because Amber's dragon is there and is already mourning, basically, before Amber has even died. Obviously, Taryn doesn't listen to this and proceeds to scorch Amber into a pile of ashes. And then Amber's dragon lets out the saddest cry, but luckily lives. Amber may be dead, but it's time to continue on with the rest of our characters. A few days later, Violet and Liam are walking around. They're doing their morning chores of going to the scribe unit, getting the scrolls that are needed for battle brief, or just books in general that are needed around the campus. They're talking about a little bit of everything. Eventually, Violet does ask him how Liam knows Xaden. Liam explains that Xaden and him were both fostered by the same estate after their parents were killed for starting a rebellion. So they're basically brothers. Violet is left confused though because only Liam's mother was part of the rebellion. His father had nothing to do with it. We also learned that the capital of the area that most of the rebellion people lived in was burned to the ground. So that's unfortunate. Liam explains to us that his father was also killed even though he wasn't part of the rebellion. And then he goes on about his sister and how she'll be here next year. Violet is again confused because the way he worded it, it doesn't sound like his sister wants to be here next year, and she didn't think all the marked ones had to come here. She thought it was just the marked ones of the leaders of the rebellion, not everybody involved. Liam basically just says, no, you're wrong. All of us have to be here. When she asks how many kids are going to be forced into the Riders Quadrant because of this, he says 107 of them. And the youngest of them is 6 years old. Obviously, she won't be forced into the Riders Quadrant as 6 years old, but when she's ready, 14 years later, she's still going to be forced to be a Rider. They'd been waiting for Jacinia as they were talking about all this. She comes back and she's like, hey, the scroll on top, it is for Professor Markham. Got it, cool. Well, while these two are walking back, the scroll on top for Professor Markham falls off the cart. And this scroll just says, the conditions at Somerton are particularly concerning. A village was ransacked and supply convoy looted last night. They find this strange because it's yet another high altitude attack where a lot of these attacks have been where the wards are failing and where the Griffins can get in, even though Griffin riders are going to be weaker at high altitude because the Griffins aren't as strong there. They don't have the lungs to support high altitude. And it doesn't make sense because of what they know. They trade with the Griffin Riders, so there's no reason for them to be attacking a trade route to try to get more stuff. They're already trading back and forth, and everybody had seemed satisfied. But they don't really know what to do about this and figure they'll hear more about it in Battle Brief, so they just put it aside for now. As they're waiting for Battle Brief to start, our whole group is just making jokes about Violet's sex life because she is in a mood, like always. Liam then says something about her being protected at night now. Violet's like, what does that mean? Are you sleeping outside of my door? What are you talking about? Liam then has to explain that Xaden warded her door so only she could get in, and also him since he warded the door. Then the professor for Battle Brief walks in and announces that the winner of the squad battles won't only get the honor of winning, but they'll also get to the front lines first. Violet is just sitting there while everybody else is cheering, thinking, so we have a chance at dying quicker? This is a weird reward. And then they start Battle Brief, and the scroll these two saw this morning was never brought up. Skip a month. We're at the sparring gym. Violet is sparring with Rhiannon. Rhiannon is still doing her best to teach her more stuff, but Rhiannon is also taking it easy on her today. Violet also doesn't have her dragon scale vest on because she washed it, she's letting it dry. A bunch of people she knows are around, so she feels pretty safe. Violet is telling her to push her harder, and Xaden walks by and agrees with Violet. He's like, you can't just take it easy on her all the time, it's not gonna be helpful. And then Xaden and Garrick decide to start sparring shirtless, and basically the entire sparring gym just stops to gawk at them. Especially Violet and Imogen are gawking at them. She's gawking at them, our boys are gawking at them. Literally everybody is looking over there. Mind you, men at this school spar shirtless all the time, so they must have some spectacular abs or something for everybody to be like, oh my gosh. Liam eventually butts in and says, stop objectifying the wing leader. Violet and Rhiannon counter back, we could just be watching for technique. They are not watching for technique. Dane walks over, mad as always, and says, well, if you're this easily distracted, we're definitely not winning squad battles. Dane, you can say you find them hot too, it's okay. This does snap them out of it and they get back to sparring. Rhiannon eventually swipes Violet's legs when she's not really paying attention again, and then she goes to the ground and it knocks the breath out of her. Rhiannon comes over just saying, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. There, you're on a sparring mat, you're gonna be okay. Of course, Jack is there and starts mocking this. And then of course, Liam is up in a second ready to defend Violet. Xaden also finds a way to quickly get over there to stand right behind her. Even Imogen has gotten closer to Violet during this time. Violet just says to Jack, we both know when it was 3 against 1, you ran away because you are a coward. Dane mutters under his breath about this, and Xaden just says she's not wrong. After Jack backs off, Dane tries to come over to start a conversation with Violet, and Xaden is now standing right in front of Violet, still staring her directly in the eyes and just says, go away, to Dane. And he leaves. Thank you. Xaden then asks her, why don't you have on your dragon scale armor that has saved your life countless times? She argues back, I have so many people watching me right now, clearly I'm fine. But she goes back to put it on, but she does watch him walk away, and she notices that he has a bunch of silver scars on his back. And then after this, she hears Taryn and Darna agreeing that she's ready because she kept her temper. Ready for what? I don't know. And once Violet is back in her room getting ready for bed that night, she feels this raw power go through her. And it starts to ease after a little bit after she was screaming in pain from it, but she can still feel it in her veins. And especially around that relic mark that the dragons put on her. And this heat starts to wash over her and centers low in her belly. So she walks out, trying to go outside just to cool off a little, leading her to run into Liam. Looking at Liam, she realizes that this feeling she has all of a sudden is lust. Proceed to have the most awkward conversation, and she runs away so she doesn't jump on this poor boy. So why is she feeling this? Well, Mated Dragons over here, and they're doing Mated Dragons things, and, Taryn just gave her a whole bunch of her power, opening a new doorway of connection for them. So now she's feeling all of his emotions while they're getting freaky over here, and Violet has no way to stop this because she just got access to all this power. Violet then gets outside to basically instantly run into Xaden, who of course is the person she would most like to use this energy towards. He offers her some fantasy world illegal substances. She doesn't take them, but he said it would help dull the emotion. This girl is ready to do just about anything to get with this man right now. Xaden eventually says, Violet, you're gonna need to learn how to shield him out. And snaps back, I just got this power. I have no clue what I'm doing. After Xaden makes her say, pretty please, what she actually says is, would you pretty please teach me how to shield before I accidentally climb you like a tree and we both wake up with regrets? Climbing him like a tree is her #1 thought throughout this whole book. Xaden then talks her through how to ground herself, basically in her happy place, and make a doorway for Taryn's power so she will be able to close that doorway. Which leads me with one question. As a girl with aphantasia, what would I have to do? Would this even be possible? Would I just be stuck with dragon emotions? This is not a situation that I should be worrying about, but we're adding it onto my already existing anxiety. I'm now worried about overwhelming dragon emotions because I can't visualize anything. So how would I pluck them out? I need Rebecca to confirm this. If somebody can go to a Q&A and ask her how somebody with aphantasia without a mind's eye would be able to shield out their dragon's emotions, let me know, because I have so many questions. Anyways, back to the story. She does all of this very, very fast and is feeling much more in control of her emotions. She's still feeling the emotion, though. Xaden is not helping because he's just staring at her and says, "You are astonishing. I couldn't do that for weeks." My guy, read the room. This is not the time for compliments. Then his hand is on her face. He is staring at her mouth. They're both talking about what a bad idea it would be for them to kiss right now. You'll never guess what they do. You'll never guess. They start making out. Hardcore making out. 'Cause I guess when your dragons are f***ing, you get lucky. I'm never talking again. He eventually stops them from going any further because this is not their own brains thinking about this and tells her to please go inside. Of course, the next day, Rhiannon over here gets all the tea and Violet is filled with regrets because awkward! Before Violet's first class with Professor Carr, who is in charge of the class when you start using your signet ability, Dane comes over to give a half-ass apology about how he's so sorry that he tried to read her thoughts without her permission for the Amber memory. She then ends his conversation with saying, "Have a little respect for me." And he says, "All right, Violet," as he touches her face. It's now January. She has been working non-stop with her powers, but still no signet ability yet. Riddick did get the signet of ice wielding. Liam got the signet of farsight. He can see things from really, really far away. And tomorrow, Jack is gonna face Violet on the mat. I'm sure that'll go well. He definitely won't try to murder her or anything like he's tried to do 50 times already. And with this information in hand, Violet goes to Liam and asks him, as a friend, to not go tell Xaden about this. She wants Liam, who is her personal bodyguard, to not go tell Xaden anything about this because he'll try to help. Honey, this man wants to kill you. So without any further ado, let's cut right to their fight because this should go well, shouldn't it? Well, right before the fight, she does let Liam run off to go try and find Xaden for him to actually get there in time to help if anything does happen that he needs to step in for. She draws first blood, but eventually, Jack has her face in his hands, not in a romantic way, and she feels this power surging through her like electricity. And just before Violet blacks out, she gets a hand in her pocket, uncaps this vial, and throws it in his face. Jack now drops to the floor, clutching his throat now. Riddick runs over to check on Violet. Violet just says oranges before she blacks out, because Jack is apparently deathly allergic to oranges. Violet now wakes up in the infirmary with Xaden just sitting in a chair glaring at her, and all he says is, "Oranges?" Xaden is going on about how stupid of an idea this was, and she just goes, "Well, you know what? I think the kiss scared you off, so there." Xaden rightfully just says, "That is not what we are talking about right now at all." But clearly, I can't trust Liam, so I'm taking over everything involving you. Next day, a sparring session with Xaden, and this man got her custom-made daggers. Ah! True love! I want custom-made daggers that I don't even throw the... I want custom-made daggers, and I don't even throw daggers. or this. That I don't even throw the... But to get her custom daggers in the official college, war college, murder college way, she has to win them off of him, so get them off of him while they're fighting. Xaden proceeds to swipe her feet out from under her. She falls on the mat. He's now on top of her again. It's their classic pose, honestly, and tells her to start disarming him. And she does. And there is plenty of flirty dialogue while she's disarming this man of all his daggers. Then, before Carr's class one day, Xaden pulls her aside and says, "We're doing our own thing," because he wants to work on some things she can work on right now. Her signet hasn't happened yet, so there's a lot of other stuff they can be working on. And he's pretty confident that a lot of third and second years are going to end up called to the front lines next year. And with him already going to be on the front lines next year, since this is his last year in college, she would be one of the first ones called up. When these two get to the flight field, there's a professor, Dane's dad is there, and her mom is there. Lilith, of course, can't be happy that her daughter got the best dragon around. She has to make a belittling comment about how she hasn't got her signet power yet. She also makes a strange comment towards Xaden, basically saying, "You proved your loyalty years ago." Violet tries to ask what that was about, and Xaden just says boundaries. I mean, good to have, but I would like to know what that is about, Mr. Xaden, sir. He reveals today they are all learning something. Their dragons are all on the flight field, they're all learning something. Violet needs to learn how to stay in her seat, Xaden needs to learn why it is so hard for her to stay in her seat, and Darna needs to learn how to keep up with all of them. Taryn needs to learn tighter flight formations, and Sigale just needs to learn how to not be in charge all the time, because now Taryn will be. I love Sigale. Cut a few days later, they've been doing squad battle stuff all day, which is just a bunch of different things to see who has the best squad. Last challenge of this portion just seems to be a mat fight, and Liam is currently crushing his opponent, so they're doing pretty good. After Liam wins, everybody thought the last portion of the squad battle would be tomorrow. But surprise, it's actually right now. And what they're supposed to be doing is making a plan on what they could steal that would be the most valuable for the enemy to have. Imogen steps up and takes charge of their group. They start throwing out plans. Finally, Violet seems to have an idea, and Imogen's like, "Tell me." And Violet says, "We could sneak into my mom's office and get something from there." They make a plan on how to get into the office. Quinn uses her ability of astral projection. I don't know why I didn't print out a picture of Quinn. I didn't think I mentioned her this much. I'm so sorry. But Quinn's gonna use her power of astral projection to project herself in front of the guard and then run away so the guard will chase her away, but it's just a fake her. After the guard is away, they all run in. They're looking around, they can't decide what to take. Violet does find a few notes on her mom's desk that make the war sound worse than they're being told it is. But then, Violet sees an updated battle map from them. They grab that off the wall and they make their grand escape. They may be the last group back, but they got back on time and they easily win the squad battle. Xaden even tips an imaginary hat towards her. So they win and they get to go to the front lines. Woo! They're getting a tour of this base outpost when some of the dragon riders get back, and guess who just happens to be here? Mira! So they have the best sisterly reunion anybody could ever ask for. Running, they're jumping, they're screaming, they're hugging. Mira just says, "You didn't die!" And then a little later in the day, we find out that Rihanna's family actually is only a 5-minute flight from this outpost. And her niece or nephew, she doesn't even know what she's had yet, would currently be born and alive. So her and Violet now make a plan how to sneak out. As they're sneaking out on the night they made the plan to sneak out, Mira instantly catches them and is like, "You guys were acting fishy all day. Did you really think I wouldn't know something was going on?" They explain why they're sneaking out, and Mira's like, "Fine, I'll help." Violet and Mira are talking while Rhiannon is with her family, catching up with her new little niece. If I'm wrong, just let me know. We learn that Mira has gotten a new scar from a Griffin Rider attack. She also mentions there was a riot of dragons she saw past the border, but she didn't know anybody was out there, but she doesn't know all the plans, so probably not a big deal. Violet then spills basically all the tea about Dane and some about Xaden. Mira goes into overprotective sister mode and starts warning her about a whole bunch of stuff. Mira also surprises her with the book Violet had read growing up about Wyvern and Venom. These two then head outside to give Rhiannon some time to say goodbye to her family in private. She's asking Mira if she knows how long mated dragons can be separated, and then Xaden comes out of the shadows and says, apparently 3 days. Skip to the next day. They are now doing battle brief with Mira. Mira is asking how many of the third years have been called out to service. Xaden and the other third years in the room raise their hands. Dane pipes in saying, "No, you can't be called out to service when you're a third year. It doesn't happen." Now, before we get into the rest of this, their group was split up into 2 groups for the day, so we only have a handful of our characters with us right now, okay? After Mira proves her point to Dane, that third years do get called up to the front lines occasionally, they jump into battle brief and Mira basically just says, highest ranking, take control. Dane jumps into that right away, but then Liam's like, our wing leader is here. Xaden's like, no, it's fine. Give Atos the power we all know he wants. Violet then whispers to Xaden, stop being such a And this is when, in Violet's head, she hears Xaden's voice saying, you haven't even seen me try to be a yet. Now, amazing dialogue aside, they can speak to each other in mind form, but she can't figure out how to speak back to him, so right now, it's just Xaden talking to her while she just has to sit there and take it. After many shenanigans in the scenario that Dane is leading and not getting any help from Xaden the entire time, finally, Violet communicates with Taryn. She just says, Xaden's being an ass. Taryn just replies, you have the ability to be an ass as well. Real talk. You just have to find the doorway of his in your mind. And she still can't figure it out. After they're done with the scenario, Mira calls Dane, Xaden, and Violet all out to have a little talk-a-talk. She throws up a sound shield around all of them and then starts laying into them. First, she goes after Dane, saying, "You're being an ass and you're giving up your shot at being a wing leader because you're mad she bonded his dragon's mate." Dane goes to argue, saying he is the worst thing for her. Mira agrees with this, but she says there's nothing any of us can do about it, so get over it. Whatever is going on with you is screwing up your squad, so you and Violet need to figure it out. Then she turns on Xaden, saying, what can I expect for her next year? That she'll have to ride out to you every 3 days because your dragons can't be separated that long? Violet interrupts her and is like, we can't really tell the giant dragons what to do. Mira just turns on her and says, yes, because you can't live this way. You will be missing out on so much because of him. Killing someone isn't the only way to destroy them. Xaden jumps in now and says, in case you haven't noticed, I'm here. She's like, yeah, I know you're here. And he says, no, I'm here. I flew here. Violet didn't have to go anywhere. I'm the one missing out on stuff right now. Violet now jumps back in saying, and next year we'll figure it out. He's the one who has helped me the most. He's the one who has taken every spare minute to try to help me stay in my seat. Mira then goes, you can't stay in your seat? How the hell can you not stay in your seat? And this is one of Violet's lines that just hits so close to home for so many chronically ill people. Because I'm not you. I'm strong because of training, but that doesn't fix me. Mira softens now and just says, why didn't you tell me? And then adding on to it, Violet says, because there's nothing you can do to fix me. There is nothing anyone can do to change the way I was made. And then Taryn butts in saying, there's a drift of griffins coming their way, so they gotta get out. Violet wants to stay and fight because of course she does. Mira just looks at Xaden and says, if you want to show me I can trust you, get her out of here now. And he does exactly that. Even though she is begging him to let her stay. He ends up kissing her to basically distract her for a little bit. Violet is thinking this means he's going to let her stay, but then Taryn comes and just scoops her right up. And now, 2 days later, she is sitting outside of Professor Markham's office just waiting for news on Mira to know she's alive after the griffin attack. This is when Xaden comes over with coffee because Taryn told him that she wasn't sleeping. They end up bonding a little bit, finding out his actual age, 23, his birthday, all that good stuff. She then asks, so what made you not want to ruin me anymore? He says a whole lot of moments, but the one that really sticks out is when he says, I realized I messed up because I couldn't stop thinking about you. And then in their telepathy, he says, does it even matter as long as things have changed between us? Violet just says, don't do that. And he says, do what? Speak directly into your mind or say I can't get you out of mine. Either. Then frickin' Dane shows up, ruining every moment. Every time this man comes up on the page, I just want to write him out. I want to erase him from the story. He comes along asking if Violet wants breakfast. Xaden in their telepathy just says, that's a stupid question. And then she shoots back in telepathy to him, knock it off. She learned how to do it. Is telepathy the right word? I feel like telepathy is the best word I have. The professor finally shows up and after a little back and forth with Violet does confirm that Mira made it out alive and she is okay. Violet then runs up to the flight field where Andarna is waiting and she just cries with her from relief. The next few days, Violet is actually now asking Xaden questions to get to know him, and eventually she asks about the silver scars on his back. He then closes up asking, why do you want to know? While they're talking about this, they're perched on the side of the cliff on their dragons. When Violet says, why won't you tell me? Sigale just takes off with him on her back and is like, nope. Taryn just says, leave it alone. He cares about you. All right, part of the war games now. It is basically just capture the flag, but with dragons, and there's some eggs and stuff they need to try to get. Some people are on offense, some people are on defense. That's all you really need to know. And again, totally fine if you murder someone. They don't care. Now Dane, while making the plan for a squad, obviously actually uses what he learned from Mira and makes up a great plan for them. And when all the dragons land, Taryn is wearing a saddle. Violet is visibly shocked. Xaden just explains there's nothing in the rules stating that a dragon can't have a saddle, and it will free up his power, so hopefully you can get your signet soon. And of course, Xaden had this all made custom. And this is where Xaden completely wins me over. With this line of, you have worked just as hard, if not harder, than every rider in the quadrant. Just because your body is built differently than others doesn't mean you don't deserve to keep your seat. It takes more than a few straps of leather and a pommel to define a writer. Round of applause for the man who understands. This book will sometimes get hate for Violet not having a chronic illness that is said exactly what it is, or people talk about this book not believing that Violet would be able to do this, saying it doesn't make any sense. Which is so funny to me because the whole message of the book is she has to prove everybody wrong, and even people in the actual world can't accept that she can do this. I make little jokes and stuff about her being chronically ill and them letting her into the army, but it feels different when perfectly abled people are belittling her. And for a lot of people, I think if we don't see ourselves in her personality, we see ourselves in her struggle. And Violet as a character may piss me off every once in a while, a lot of times, but Violet as a character is also representation for so many people that don't normally get represented in fantasy books and have gone through these same struggles. So her struggles may seem silly to you, but they are real life to a lot of people in this world. Making fun of a character, totally okay. Making fun of a character's disabilities that other people have, not so much. She finally accepts this gift and says, thank you. He leans in and whispers in her ear, you're welcome. And then Dane has to pop up because he always has to pop up in these situations. Xaden and Violet are talking. There's Dane. And your friend Steve. Steve. Violet jumps back from Xaden, but Xaden stays right where he is, as he should. He just kind of looks at the saddle and says, is that a saddle? I mean, I'm fine with it, but what? Xaden, using their telepathy, just says, I bet it would be more awkward if I kissed you right now. What? I mean, you're right, but okay. Violet doesn't say this to him, but she does think, yes, please. What she actually says back to him, though, in their telepathy is, the next time you kiss me, better not just to be to piss off Dane. Xaden smirks and then saunters off to go steal an egg with his dragon. And then Andarna shows up, and she's like, I'm gonna play too! They go tell her to roll in some mud because she is a shining golden beacon. It helps disguise her a little bit for sure. Now a group of them is in the middle of battling with First Wing, and all of a sudden she feels her power really building up, and she thinks, I am about to overload and completely just combust in front of all these people. That's when Violet and Taryn spot where the egg is. They let Xaden know so he can swoop back in and get the egg. They then spot Liam and Jack battling it out, and Jack is winning. Because Jack decides to jump onto Liam's dragon, stab Liam, so he is then free falling off of his dragon. Violet tells Taryn, catch him, but they are going to be way too late to actually catch Liam before he crashes into the ground and dies. This is when Violet cries out for Andarna, and Andarna just says, do it. Just focus on everything but you and Taryn. She does this, she pauses time for everybody else, and they catch Liam before he dies. She now has Liam on her dragon as well, and then has Taryn fly back up to where Jack is, because she feels this power building up, and she's like, if I'm gonna take myself and Liam out, I might as well also take Jack out with us. She then closes her eyes and throws her hands out in front of her, and thinks, I am the sky and the power of every storm that has ever been. I am infinite. Lightning then takes the tower down where Jack was under, taking him down with it. He is crushed, probably dead, and Taryn just roars in her mind, Lightning wielder! They all land, her squad is coming over to celebrate, but she just killed the first person she's ever killed and is not handling it super well. I don't think anybody really handles that super well, but she's not having a good time. Dane then comes over to confirm that was her lightning he saw on the field, and she's just standing there thinking and kind of saying aloud at the same time that she has never aimed to kill anybody. She has never gone for the killing blow, and all of a sudden, her power is the deadliest power anybody has seen in decades, centuries. She was thinking hopefully she would be a mender and she would be this person that could fix herself, but no. She is just a giant weapon. Dane is comforting her, saying, you don't have to be a weapon, you can do something else with your power. Xaden finally steps in, luckily, and says, stop babying her. He then also confirms that was her lightning and says, I thought you were a lightning wielder, but I couldn't confirm it until today. He then comforts her in a much more realistic way and says her power will save many, many lives. He then goes on to say, you want to keep Mira alive? When she's behind enemy lines, this is how. You are not just a weapon, Sorengale. You are the weapon. You train this ability, own it, and you will have the power to defend the entire kingdom. Xaden then checks in with Rhiannon to make sure that she can get Violet back to a calmer location so he can go check on Liam. Later that night, there's a knock on her door. She's expecting it to be Rhiannon, or she thinks Liam, but then remembers he's injured and in the infirmary, so it's not going to be him. She just says, come in. And it is not anyone she expected. It is our man Xaden. She is just throwing daggers at a board right now, and Xaden is very much attracted to that. What can we say? Have some flirty banter. Eventually she asks, why are you here? He says, I thought you might still be upset. She starts going on about how he told her to get over it, and he's like, no, I said you will build a stomach for it. You will never get over it. Good people don't get over killing people. They continue on to talk about a few more slightly related things in this topic. They are now face to face, and he says, show me what you got. Expecting her to hit him? No, she kisses him. She goes for that option instead. She goes for option B. He tries to say, this isn't what you want, but like, my guy. It's definitely what she wants. So they end up doing it for the first time, and they destroy multiple things in the process because her lightning power just happens whenever stuff happens. So she's shooting lightning out of the room. The whole campus will soon know whenever Violet is hooking up with anyone. Cause, she does not have the power to be discreet anymore, apparently. After they've had some fun times, she asks about the scars on his back again, and he explains that there are 107 scars for the 107 marked children. They were planning to kill these children as well, but Xaden decided to take on the responsibility for all of them, so if anybody steps out of line, his life is also forfeit. He starts getting up to leave to go to his room, but she's like, no, stay, and he does. They're curled up together now. He says, don't fall for me. And she's like, okay, why did you think I have lightning powers? And he then explains that the first night they kissed, he saw lightning go across the sky, but he couldn't confirm if that was her, but it was definitely her. Next morning, Xaden, gone, but there's a bunch of freshly picked violets sitting on the table in there. It's really cute. She's lacing up her boots when there's a knock on the door, and it's Professor Carr coming to take her out to train privately. Now, she's a little scared because she did just show this amazing power that, maybe it's too amazing and Professor Carr is just gonna snap her neck. They end up flying up high on a mountaintop so she doesn't accidentally kill anybody with her cool lightning powers. Taryn also stays close the whole time because he also doesn't super trust Carr alone with her. And I get it, because he says things like this. Keep your loyalties clear. You and Ryerson both have exceptionally lethal powers that any rider would be envious of. But together, you would be a formidable enemy who command could simply not afford to let exist. Do you understand what I'm saying? Step out of line, we're gonna kill you, is what he's saying. Carr then asks how her power has come to the last few times, and she just thinks about the emotions that have brought it out. Anger isn't working right now, so Taryn pipes in saying, should I get the wing leader? I love this dragon so much. This is when Xaden chimes in right on time, saying, why are you so far away? She explains why she is so far away, and then he says another famous Xaden line that we have all heard over book talk many a time, so I'm gonna read it right now for everybody who hasn't heard it for some reason. There's nowhere in existence you could go that I wouldn't find you, Violence. I can't say it as well as any of the audiobook actors, but you get the point. And then Xaden sends over a bunch of images of her during the activities they were doing last night, and all of a sudden, her lightning powers work. She literally has to be turned on to get her powers to work right now. A big problem, they do learn that she can't aim for crap. Lightning is just super sporadic. She has no control on where it's going. She gets back to her wreck of a room. There are curtains burned, dressers completely broken. Xaden is there to help her clean this up, and eventually she asks him, where were you that night that I almost got murdered? He then opens up and says, Athbian. You can't know why or ask any more questions, but that's where I was. She then opens up the storybook that she read in her childhood, the one with the venom and wyverns and all those fun mythical creatures. And there's a note from her dad in there. My Violet, by the time you find this, you'll most likely be in the scribe quadrant. Remember that folklore is passed from one generation to the next to teach us about our past. If we lose it, we lose the links to our own past. It only takes one desperate generation to change history. Even erase it. I know you'll make the right choice when the time comes. You have always been the best of both your mother and me. Love, Dad. Father, could you be any more cryptic? He theorizes that maybe somebody in leadership is corrupt because all the stories in this book are about the venom becoming corrupt. She doesn't really know what's going on. They start cleaning up, but Xaden's like, you know what would be more fun to do right now? And she's like, actually, I know you don't want feelings to get involved, but my feelings are already getting involved. So, unless you also want to admit you have feelings, we should stop this right now. And then he says, I have absolutely no intention of falling for you. Okay, sure, yeah, right, buddy, right. They agree to not hook up again, but she's trying desperately to get him to admit that he has feelings, so she says. A month later, we figure out that the king is coming to celebrate Reunification Day at the college, the day where they killed all the marked children's parents. They're all gonna celebrate that together, and Violet can still not aim her lightning at all. Xaden and Violet are using their telepathy to try to get each other back in bed for different reasons. When Violet says to him, if you just man up and admit there's something between us, I would strip down to my skin so you could see every single inch of me, and once I had you begging, I'd drop down to my knees. That's when Xaden chokes on his water. Our girl may know how to play this game pretty well right now. Not something I would do, but you know, Dragon World, go for it, girl. Now, we are 10 days away from graduation, and it is now Reunification Day. Again, the day that all the marked ones' parents were killed, also the day her brother died. So, it's just a great day all around. So in the middle of battle brief, using their telepathy, Violet says to Xaden, take me to bed, because she wants a distraction from this day. This turns into Xaden again saying, I'm not going to fall for you. Which then leads her to say, okay, so is Imogen the problem? Because you seem to like her. And then they answer some questions aloud in battle brief that are very clearly pointed at each other. He doesn't even dignify the Imogen question with a response. All right, so time to get ready for the party. She's wearing a dress with a high neckline, and it's got a very high slit for movement. Her group all walks in together, but pretty quickly scatters apart, but Liam stays with Violet. Then she starts to notice the stares that Liam is getting, and then she pieces together that she just brought sweet Liam, who has never done anything wrong to anybody, in my opinion, to a party to celebrate the death of his parents. She's now trying to find a way out when the king and her mother are now approaching her. Oh, and also General Melgern. The king is talking about her cool dragon and doting on her, blah, blah, blah. And also kind of talking down to Liam, but Liam's good at playing this game and just takes it all as a compliment and acts like it's a compliment towards him. They finally get out of this conversation, get out of the building, and she says to Liam, you know I adore you, right? But go away. I'm going to see Xaden. So, she walks over to the parapet where Garrick and Bodhi are standing at the area right before you go walk off into it. She asks them if he's out there. They confirm that he is. As you see, we're his best friends and we're not out there because we don't have a death wish. And she just says, well, I'm just his. I can't decide if bad writing or good writing there. I can't. She starts walking over the parapet in a freaking dress right now. When Xaden sees her, of course he's like, what the hell are you doing out here? He starts walking over to her. Eventually they're standing together now, and she says, you want me. You show it in every sparring lesson, in every flight lesson when you go and find Violet early in the morning. You show it in a million different ways, so please stop denying it. She finishes off by saying, I'm telling you, I am ready to risk my heart. They then get back on the Imogen topic real quick, and he's like, no, Imogen doesn't look at me. She looks at Garrick. When they were fighting and she was staring at this guy right here, not him. And then Xaden says, there's only you, Violence. Even when I'm not with you, there's only you. They go on about needing to trust each other, and Xaden is like, I can't make you any promises. I'm tired of fighting this. It's then revealed that Xaden was jealous of Dane at one point. Shocker. None of us saw that. They eventually get to his room, and she just takes off his boots for him, knowing what this day must feel like to him. Since, you know, parents murdered on this day, celebration, little weird. So she just crawls in bed and cuddles up next to him. She eventually says, I think I'm in love with you. We just confessed we actually both had feelings for each other, but okay, let's keep going. Are we getting married in the next scene? Who knows? And then they just start making out. And then everybody probably knows what happens next because more lightning starts happening. They even break his window with it. Then there's intense knocking on the door. They're about to go into for around like 3 or 4 at this point. Xaden's not too happy about this. He's like, what's going on? People better be dying. And it's just Garrick saying, honestly, there might be. Because they've called the full quadrant in formation right now. And you better bring Sorengale with you. We're under attack. She gets information and instantly Everybody knows where and what she's been doing because she didn't have her flight levers with her, so she put on one of Xaden's, which have all the marks that points towards it being Xaden, like the fourth wing leader mark that only he would have. Everybody knows. Xaden then lets Violet know it's just war games. He's not too happy about this. Dane's dad then takes to the stage explaining everything and then lets all the wing leaders know where they're going. And Xaden is going to Athbian, which is beyond the wards and not somewhere they would normally send people for war games, but whatever, they're just doing something different, right? This is a big 5-day mission for everybody involved, no matter where they're going. Everybody in the quadrant then splits up to pack for the 5-day mission. Violet thinks she's going with Dane and the rest of her squad, and then when she gets to the flight field and sees Terran, there's now a little hook on his saddle and a little vest on Andarna. So when they're flying for a long distance and she can't keep up, she can just hook onto him. Then Xaden comes over saying, I need you. Dane just says, I'm sorry? Violet just explains he just wants to say goodbye, it's fine. Except wrong, because she is going with him, obviously. Dane is very, very upset about this, but eventually has to give in. There's nothing he can do to change their minds about this decision. And when saying goodbye to Violet, he says, I'll miss you. They make it past the wards and everybody's kind of on edge now. They stop about 20 minutes out from the outpost to let the dragons fill up on water. They don't know what the outpost is going to be looking like when they get there or if there's a close by water source for the dragons. Liam comes over to check on Violet because she's wearing her worry on her face, but she doesn't really say anything. She just keeps staring at Xaden, and then Xaden looks over at her and says, we'll be here for more than 30 minutes if you keep looking at me like that. Liam then asks about that situation. Again, she basically just says, I don't know. And Liam, who we know, has a lot of respect for Xaden and a lot of love for Xaden, says, I think you've gotten yourself in over your head. Violet's a little confused by this, but they continue on to have a very sweet conversation because it's Liam. Every conversation with him is just sweet. And they're both clearly showing the respect and admiration they have for each other. He's walking over to go sit in the shade alone. This is when Xaden comes over in view of everybody and grabs her hand. So everybody knows what's going on now. I mean, they weren't really hiding it, but now everybody knows. They get out of sight of everybody, and actually he just starts massaging her legs, like legit just massaging her legs, because they've been riding for hours. They've been riding dragons for hours. They do eventually start kissing, but then he breaks away as if he's listening for something all of a sudden, and then just says, oh shit. And then this female voice she doesn't recognize at all just says, is this seriously how you writers spend your time? Xaden then spins around, hides Violet with his shadows. Then this new girl is just like, oh, come on, we already know that's the youngest Sorengale. Before he takes the shadows away from Violet, he says, I need you to stay calm with their telepathy. And then he takes the shadows away, and what Violet sees is a couple of griffin riders. And she yells for Terran in her head. She then starts looking around at everybody Xaden has brought with him and notices they are all marked. So she starts reaching for her lightning power. She may not have a lot of control, but it is still a scary power. This is when Xaden pulls her arms to her side so she can't use them. Then Terran finally lands. He's at least here. Xaden then turns to Violet, kisses her, and says, if you have ever trusted me, I need you to do that right now. She's just completely confused as Xaden passes her off to Liam to still hold her arms. He's holding them. He just says, I'm sorry, Violet. She obviously just says, let me go. He doesn't do that until Terran starts growling, and then he lets her go. Smart decision. And then when Xaden gets to the Griffin Riders, the people they're fighting a war against, he says, you're early. And her heart stops and starts to shatter because she knows she has been completely played. She doesn't know how, but she has been played. We find out that Xaden has been the one bringing the Griffin Riders weapons, even though they are fighting Navarian. And then they all start talking about a horde of venom. That's so funny because those aren't real, right? Right, guys? Why is nobody acting like this isn't a big joke? What's going on? Yeah, so the Griffin Riders are just stopping to warn them. Before the Griffin Riders can leave, they say, if you think you'll ever convince a Sorengale to risk their neck for anyone outside their own borders, then you're a fool. The Griffin Riders now leave. Violet is talking to Terran about all of them having relics and that she's a fool and she fell for this. And then Terran just says, yes, they are. And Violet realizes her dragons knew the whole time and didn't tell her. She then turns on Liam and goes, were we even really friends? And he says, Violet, we are friends, but I owe him everything. She starts ranting about everything. Xaden comes over and says, Violence, let me explain. He tries to step towards her and she says, if you touch me again, I will kill you. This is a no touching zone. They argue, and Xaden is trying to just explain everything. He explains that Griffin Riders are called flyers, about how he's not the villain, and then he says, did you ever stop to think that maybe we started on the right side of the war, but now we're on the wrong side? She just says, no! I was trained as a scribe. I know our history. They have weapons to kill dragons. He just corrects her, no, to kill Venin. Then has to talk her through Venin being real, and then she has to put together that if Venin are real, then Navarian is just ignoring the outside world that is struggling with these creatures. And it's been easy for them to do, because once they cross the wards, only dragons can use magic. Not Venin, not griffins, only dragons. Meaning that her government, the king she trusts, would have turned his back on the rest of the world just to keep a small portion of it safe, while the rest falls into ruin. They explain that the raids that the Griffin Flyers have been doing are to get the supplies to make the weapons that actually kill the Venin. And Violet goes on and on and on about how he betrayed her, how he should have told her. But her best friend, Dane, her best friend is a mind reader. If Xaden would have told her any of this, then there is no way to guarantee that Dane wouldn't figure it out, because Dane touches her face all the time. The point being further proven that clearly some point after Xaden had told her about Afbian, Dane touched her face and read her mind, and now they were sent here by Colonel Atos for who knows why. He says, this is bigger than you and me. I watched my father get executed for trying to help these people. I couldn't risk you. You love me. And she interrupts saying, loved. And he just says, love. You love me. He keeps trying to convince her that everything they had together was real, and finally she's just like, let's just get to Afbian. And Darna's like, we didn't lie, Violet. We just didn't tell you everything. Violet snaps back, that's lying by omission. Taryn just chimes in saying, she's right, Golden One. She now starts piecing it all together that her favorite childhood book was not just a really rare book, it was a banned book. She then thinks back to the note that her dad left her in this banned book. Taryn also confirms that Venin are real, and it only took one generation to erase them from reality, so that her people could stay safe within the wards while the rest of the continent died. Now, they've reached the edge of the forest, and they see a very, very empty outpost. It's not supposed to be empty. They wouldn't empty it for war games, but it's empty. Xaden now tells everybody to stop and that he's pretty sure this isn't war games. He also tells the still very pissed off Violet to stay next to him. Liam, using his farsight, checks on the outpost. There's nothing around it, nobody in it. Xaden then turns to Violet asking, what did Dane say to you before we left? She's like, he just said he would miss me. Xaden adds on, he also said I was going to get you killed. Violet's like, yeah, but he always says stuff like that. It's fine. Wake up, girl. It's time to wake up. We gotta go. I can't snap, but if I could, I would be snapping. Xaden then turns on her and starts putting things together and says, did you tell him about my trip to Afbian? She's like, no. Then he's like, did he ever touch your face like this? She's like, yeah, but he just does that all the time. And then she says, I would have known if he read my memories. And he says, no, trust me, Violence, you wouldn't. She's just left shaking her head in shock. Then Garrick, who had gone to check things out, returns with a note that is addressed to Xaden from Colonel Atos, Dane's dad. Liam jumps in real fast saying, I think I see something past the outpost. But Xaden is now reading the letter that says, survive if we can. Great sign. This is when Violet finally accepts that Dane read her memories, gave this information to his father, doing all of them. Xaden turns to Violet first saying, this isn't your fault, and then turns to everyone else saying, we were sent here to die. They now all rush to get somewhere so they can actually see what's happening down in the valley village near them. Taryn now pipes in saying there's something off in the valley, and then Xaden reads them the rest of the letter that says that he has a choice of abandoning the village of their enemy or abandoning their wing. They are testing his loyalty without actually just saying they're testing his loyalty. So, their options are, they can leave now, get to a new outpost, start the war games. But if they leave now to do all of that, they are leaving this village that is clearly under attack right now by something to defend for itself and probably let the 300 people there die. And this is when Liam confirms that there are Venin in this village. 4 of them. Doesn't seem like a lot, but these are very powerful, magical beings that take their power directly from the source, from the earth. And now, 7 Griffin Riders have just landed near them. They then hear a big boom from down in the village, Bodhi is ready to run down there. Xaden says, wait, we need to actually form a plan. Violet says, at least there aren't any wyvern. And they're like, yeah, those are fake. So, in total, there are 10 dragon riders to 7 griffin riders as well, and only the 4 venin. Again, it's gonna be really hard to beat them. But luckily, they do have the daggers that have the warded alloy in them, which is the thing that lets them actually kill the venin. So they finally go to talk to the griffin riders. And the griffin riders tell them, we're going down to fight. Please leave. We're all gonna die. We've accepted that. We saw 2 venin destroy an entire city the other day, so there's no shot that we can take them on right now. The griffin riders have accepted their fate. The riders know if they join in, they will most likely die as well. But then Xaden says, Sigale says she's never backed down from a fight before, so she's not going to start now. He turns to the group and says, but I'm not going to order any of you to fight with me. All the marked ones say, yes, they're going to fight, with Liam saying, we watched as our parents were executed because they had the courage to do the right thing. I'd like to think my death would be just as honorable. And then Violet says, I've been defenseless all my life, but now I'm a rider, and riders fight. So they are all in to take on these venin and try to keep the people in this city safe. Xaden doesn't know what to say. He just looks at her with a bajillion different expressions on his face and then just nods. She then tells Andarna to stay back and away from the battle, and if anything happens to them, for her to fly back to the Vale and get back to safety, because she cannot stand the thought of also losing a Feathertail, also losing Andarna if everybody else goes down today. Then there's a screech from the sky. It is not more dragon riders, it's the wyvern that nobody thought existed. They're here now. We've got venin and wyvern. So many of them. Before Violet can get on Terran, Xaden stops her, hands her another warded alloy dagger. He had already given her one before, so now she has 2. And she says, you're not going to try to stop me from doing this? And Xaden says, I don't pick fights I don't think I can win. Violet then mentions, won't General Melgorn be able to see what happens in this battle or already know what has happened in this battle? Because the General Melgorn's power is to see the outcome, the future of any battle. And this is when Xaden explains why marked ones aren't allowed to meet in groups larger than 3. It's because then General Melgorn can't see the future when they're together. He then cups her neck and says, stay alive. I promise I will tell you everything you need to know. And she says, I need you to survive this, even if I hate myself for still loving you. Now they're all in the sky, ready for battle. According to the dragons, there's apparently something in one of the trading posts down there that they can all feel is powerful, and they're pretty sure that's what the venin are after. They're flying around, they're fighting. Eventually Terran goes past a clock tower, breathes fire on it, makes it fall on a venin, and the venin pops up unscathed. They're perfectly fine. Like I said, very, very hard to kill. Very, very magical beings. Very, very magical beings. Very magical beings. And now the wyvern who had circled back to the valley are finally actually at the battle. So now we've got flying enemies and the 4 venin on the ground and some extra venin riders as well, apparently. A few of the marked ones are trying to get people to safety to this cave that should be safe from everything that's going on. Violet is trying to use her lightning powers. Still can't aim though. And there's currently a venin sucking the magic out of the ground and out of the people who are running towards the cave. Anything that he's sucking away the magic from, if you're on there, you're gonna shrivel up and die in a second. And this is when we lose our first rider and dragon, because she fell on the ground and her dragon also did. Liam is also in this area, but he's sprinting back to his dragon Daya right now. Then Violet and Terran go off to target this building that has an unstable force in it. It explodes, and once again, it does nothing to the wyvern or venin around it. I don't know why they tried the same trick again, but it didn't work the second time, shockingly. Their new goal is now to get the wyvern far away from the city so Violet can actually use her lightning powers on them without fearing that she's gonna kill somebody in the city. As they're flying around, she's shooting off lightning powers. She eventually hits a wyvern and it does go down. But none of the venin do. So they're not like dragons where if the dragon dies, the rider dies. They're all doing a bunch of action stuff. A wyvern looks like it's about to take a chunk out of Terran, but this is when Sigale and Xaden come in and just swipe that wyvern out of the air. No one is touching her man. Then she spots Liam and his dragon riding away from a venin on a wyvern. Violet lets Xaden know that Liam needs help. But Xaden is busy doing other stuff right now, so Violet is left alone to go over to try to help Liam. Liam then jumps off of his dragon onto the wyvern and then takes out the venin, which causes the wyvern to also die. Liam jumps back onto Daya, all seems fine, until a second later, another wyvern is diving at Terran and Violet. It's about to get Terran when Daya comes swooping in with Liam, knocks into this wyvern really hard, Liam is flung off of his dragon onto Taryn. Violet is holding on to him for dear life, while Taryn is now following Liam's dragon and the wyvern that is tangled up fighting with. Daya is now crying out in pain. She does not seem to be winning this battle with the wyvern. Because Violet's lightning is so unpredictable, she can't use her lightning to try to take this wyvern down because Daya and the wyvern are like wrapped up fighting together. This wyvern is fighting like it doesn't care if it dies as well, but it is taking Daya down with it if it has to. Violet is now urgently calling for Xaden to get over here and help, but he explains that if he leaves, then all the civilians are going to die, so he can't leave them just to help Liam, even though everything in him wants to. Another wyvern tries to get Taryn, but this time he defends himself and just rips its throat out and throws it to the ground. Xaden then communicates with Violet that he is on his way. Liam then says to Violet, "We have to take out the riders." She just says, "I know." Liam's dragon and this wyvern are just locked in a dive together, and Daya is crying out in pain over and over and over again. She does not seem to be winning this fight, and the wyvern doesn't seem to care if it crashes down with her. Liam is desperately yelling out for his dragon at this point, just wishing he could do anything to help her. And then Daya lets out one last screech before she crashes into the ground. Liam just lets out this raw scream and calls out for his dragon again. I can't. Taryn then confirms to Violet that Daya is gone, and Violet knows what this means because a dragon without a rider is a tragedy, but a rider without a dragon is dead. That's not just a phrase they use. It is what happens. If the dragon goes down, the power of the bond is also going to kill the rider with them. She just says, "Liam," and runs over to grab him. And Liam just looks healthy, strong. Nothing is wrong with him. He's not even injured. He's fine. But he is slowly fading from this world now because Daya is gone. And he just says, "Please get me to her." And Violet uses all her strength to try to get him there. But she says, "I can't. I'm so sorry. I'm not strong enough to get you there." And he just says, "It's all right." She's just begging him to fight, to stay, to please stay. And he just goes on saying, "At Parapet, you have to take care of my sister." Violet calls out to Taryn in this time, just asking, "What do I do? Is there anything I can do? Please tell me there's something I can do." And he just confirms, "No, there isn't." Liam just continues on saying, "Take care of Salone for me." Of course, Violet promises to do this. Liam, as he is dying, thinking of other people, he says, "Xaden needs you. Please hear him out." And now she just says, "Thank you, Liam. Thank you for being my shadow. Thank you for being my friend." And then Liam says, "It's been my honor." Xaden has finally made it, and he is now running over to them. Liam sees him and just says, "Daya." And Xaden says, "I know, brother. I know." He picks up Liam and gets him over to his dragon and sets him down. Just a few seconds after this, Liam's head just rolls down and he is gone. I don't want to do this. I'll have you know that I cried the first time I read this scene. I cried when I was rereading this scene. I cried writing this scene out for me to recap today, and now I have cried recapping this scene. We know this character for about a total of 200 pages, and most people who have read Fourth Wing have been impacted by his death like this, and that is just such a credit to her writing. I know people like to make fun of this book and say it has bad writing, but to make so many people care for a character that much in about 200 pages, it's talent right there. I cry over a lot of fictional character deaths the first time, but crying over it just as much time and time again is something that doesn't happen to me that often, and I just I know he's fake, and I feel like I'm gonna get roasted for including any of this. But I just like to go along with the story, and I really love this story. And to lose such a great character in the first book in such a horrible but well-written way, just takes me out every time. Okay, give me one second, guys. I'm gonna rally. I'm rallying. Okay, continuing on. No time to sit in this, though, because there are still a bunch of wyvern in the air and a few venom left to fight. Lightning is the only thing they have to kill this gap. Okay, sorry. Lightning is the only thing they really have to kill these wyvern and venom that are in the air without getting on the wyvern's back with the alloy daggers. So she just goes on up and is pushing herself to the max, just lightning, lightning, lightning. She is Storm from the X-Men right now. Even as she's taking down a wyvern, finally hitting one, another wyvern gets close and the venom jumps off of its back onto Terran's back and stabs Terran to hang on, leaving Violet to now fight this venom on Terran's back. It's not going great for her. The venom lands a blow, and we quickly discover that the sword it's using is clearly coated in some poison because she is bleeding a lot more than she should be, and it's like green and oozy. It's not great. Xaden tells her, level the playing field, and this is when he wraps Terran in shadows. She has the power of light. She knows Terran's back better than this random venom does. So Violet uses her lightning powers, lights it up for a bit, and stabs the venom with one of the daggers right in the ribs like Xaden taught her to, leaving the venom to fall off backwards and die. And that's when a bunch of wyvern also die and fall out of the sky. She finally realizes what Liam was saying. Kill the venom and the wyvern will go down. Kill the rider and then all the wyvern it's created from its magic will fall. There's one more venom left on the ground with the staff, and then there's a couple more in the sky, apparently. And this is when Andarna comes out saying, you need me. They find the last rider. Terra knows her plan and says, no, Silver One, you will burn yourself out. And she says, it is the only thing that will keep the rest of them alive. I have to. So, with Andarna's time freezing powers and her signet power of lightning, she freezes time and then uses it to slowly guide the lightning exactly where she wants it to hit the venom. And it works. More wyvern fall, but there's one more venom in the sky. Xaden then uses a shadow lasso, pulls it down, and slices its throat with one of the alloy daggers. And then Violet passes out from the insane amount of power she used to kill that venom with lightning and also freeze time at the same time. We now get into her thoughts. Seems like the battle's over. She's feeling awful, and they're talking about what to do now. Xaden is just telling her, live, please live. So it's a 12-hour flight back to Basgaev, and she is currently on the brink of death already. They're discussing on where to take her. Xaden says they're somewhere closer. Eric and a couple of others don't like this idea, and he says, well, too bad, we're going. Finally, Bodhi chimes in saying, you have to save her. Cut to, we are now in Xaden's point of view. Sigale is just telling him that Violet is going to be okay. He has been sitting in this room watching her for the past 2 to 3 days that she's been knocked out just healing. Terran now chimes into Xaden saying, you could have told her about this earlier. Xaden's like, okay, yeah, I know. Terran is just his own self-loathing thoughts, but voiced aloud from a dragon, so I'm sure that's helpful right now. But then, Violet is moving a little. And she's awake and smiling at him. Xaden checks her side to see how it's healed up, and it's basically completely healed at this point. Xaden then gets her some water and sits by her and says, I thought I was going to lose you, and then kisses her on the forehead. And then Violet leans in to kiss him, saying, you aren't going to lose me. Xaden's just thinking, wait, she still wants me? She doesn't hate me right now? What's going on? And he says, I'll make it up to you, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you'll make it up to me. And then it starts to click, and her memories start to come back clearly. Xaden can see that she is conversing with Terran right now about something, about where they are most likely, and to make sure she's not going to die. Xaden's talking aloud, saying, everything's fine. And Darna is different. He doesn't say this part aloud. She is freaking giant now. She's not the little Feathertail anymore. She is a dragon. He then mentions the healers didn't say about any lasting effects from the poison, so he doesn't really know what to expect for the rest of the healing, but she seems fine. She then just goes right by him, getting off the bed to look out the window. And they are in Aretia, the capital that the government had destroyed because that's where all the rebels were, where a lot of them were. Violet's obviously a little freaked out because it seems to not be completely burnt to the ground. They're currently in Xaden's house, mansion, fortress. They're in there. Xaden explains to her that they have been building back this location, and he knows that at some point the king or the government or whatever rules here will figure that out and try to take it back from him, but right now it's all his. She then just says, tell me one thing. Is Liam actually dead? He confirms this, but then hands her this newly finished carving of Andarna to match the one that Liam had earlier made her of Taryn as well, leaving Violet to just say, it's my fault. Xaden jumps in saying, no, I should have told you everything sooner. While Xaden is now waiting for her to get washed up and changed, he's talking to Garrick and Bodhi. They talk about how she's going to choose, and also if she does choose to side with them, she's going to have to learn how to hide her memories from Atos over here. And they're also talking about they're still trying to figure out what the dragons were drawn to in the town. They have the chest, they just can't get into whatever's in there yet. She's ready now. She's talking to Xaden again. She's asking if the fortress was all rebuilt or if it's all the same. He just says stone doesn't burn. And he's a little awkward right now. He's not on his best game. And then he says, I have to ask you, are you willing to fight with us? Violet just nods saying, I'm in. He then reaches for her. She backs up saying, not happening. No. Just because I'm in doesn't mean I've forgiven you. And I can't be with somebody I don't trust. My girl, he was hiding a rebellion from you to protect the rest of the continent. You had a mind-reading BFF over here that was touching your face all the time. What was he supposed to do? What was this man supposed to do, Violet? No, please tell me. He just says, you're right, I kept secrets. It took me a long time to realize I trusted you, and an even longer time to realize I had feelings for you. I messed up, but I will never stop trying to earn your trust. She just says, and if that's not possible? He goes on saying, you still love me. It's possible. And then goes on this whole speech. She's like, oh, maybe you actually will try. And then there's a knock on the door before she can say anything. Xaden's like, if you have any questions, ask them now. I'm guessing you have about 20 seconds. He says, do you think there's a chance we just happened to be at the outpost where the wyvern attack was happening? And then the door opens and a voice says, definitely wasn't an accident, little sister. Little sister? Brennan! It's Brennan, her dead brother, who has been dead for 6 years. 6 years. He's here. And then he just says, welcome to the revolution, Violet. And that's the end of the first book. So our characters, some have died, some very beloved have died. Some of them are starting a rebellion again. These guys have no clue what's going on over here. Her mom's the general of a lot of the army, and she has 2 dragons, and Andarna has grown up. And Dane still sucks. Also, her dead brother is alive. If you liked seeing me recap Fourth Wing and you want to see me do that with Iron Flame, go ahead, like this video, subscribe, comment letting me know that you want to see that. And maybe I'll get started on that. And maybe it'll get out before Onyx Storm is out at the start of next year. Just to close this out, Fourth Wing in so many ways is just almost a love letter to all of those chronically ill people out there, and I think that's why it has such a strong connection, because there are so many more people than you even think about that have chronic illnesses, especially like Violet's that are just hidden most of the time. You don't even know they're happening. So for all the hate that Fourth Wing gets, don't be scared to still like the book. We can admit it's a little cheesy and cringy at times, but overall, I love this series. But I can mock it in ways, and we'll enjoy doing that. So again, like this video if you want to see an Iron Flame recap, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye, y'all.